Hey guys, tonight we drift back more than 1,000 winters to the rocky rift valley of Thingvellir, where scalding geysers hiss through cracks in charcoal-black lava and the North Atlantic wind combs frigid fingers through your hair. Steam curls around you like slow-motion ghosts, carrying a sulfur note that sinks into your cloak and your nostrils with equal enthusiasm. You probably won't survive this scent-packed spa day if your modern nose insists on fragrance-free living, but humor me. Slick basalt crunches under your wool-wrapped boots. Ravens caw overhead as if auditioning for a Viking Foley gig, and the low rumble of boiling pools mingles with distant snowmelt waterfalls. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge toward the natural amphitheater at the heart of the Icelandic Althing, the grand outdoor parliament founded in 930 CE when battery life meant how long your sheep could graze before bedtime. A crowd of settlers wearing layered wadmal will gathers around the logberg, literally the low rock, waiting for the Lawspeaker to step up and belt out every statute, feud settlement, and curious clause remembered since last summer. No microphones, no teleprompters, just one resonant voice and a memory strong enough to put your phone's storage anxiety to shame. You edge in, feeling the ground tremble as a nearby hot spring exhales. That's nature's subwoofer offering complimentary surround sound. A tall figure in a scarlet cloak climbs the rock, his beard catching beads of vapor like dew on pine needles. He clears his throat. Some poor soul in the front row flinches, probably fearing an unsolicited bath in vocal-powered condensation, and begins the saga-laced prelude. Mainstream historians agree the Lawspeaker's first duty was to recite 1/3 of the entire law code each year, ensuring the full code cycled every 3 summers so nothing slipped through the volcanic cracks. It's the medieval equivalent of terms and conditions, only these clauses occasionally end with someone losing a goat instead of a warranty. Before the legal sonnet gets rolling, you notice a quirky detail guidebooks forget. The speaker jingles a pouch of river-smooth pebbles, slipping one into his left hand each time he finishes a provision, a memory palace you can literally rattle. Local gossip claims the stones hail from the Oxera River and bring luck. Skeptics whisper they also double as projectiles when debates heat up. Historians still argue whether this pebble ritual was widespread across all settlements or merely a signature quirk of this particular chieftain. Yet the gentle chink-chink offers a steady metronome for your drowsy mind. The speaker's voice rolls over you in Old Norse cadences, half poem, half courtroom transcript. You can't catch every archaic syllable, but you feel the rhythm. Grazing rights, rules for brewing ale strong enough to double as ship fuel, punishments for sheep rustling. Spoiler: your knitting needles might be confiscated, and carefully worded advice on feud resolution that boils down to try not to axe anyone before breakfast. Funny how some things never change. Modern meetings still spend 3 hours deciding who's bringing the donuts. A gust lifts your cloak and you inch closer to one of the steaming pools for warmth. The air here is a patchwork quilt. Icy on your cheeks, sauna on your shins. Like standing inside nature's malfunctioning HVAC system. You imagine ancient delegates doing the same, toes thawing while minds calculated blood money payments. An elder beside you mutters a familiar saga line about a warrior who demanded compensation of exactly 3 silver arm rings and a barrel of butter. You stifle a grin, realizing you just heard medieval Iceland's version of Supersize My Combo. The Lawspeaker pauses to sip from a horn of fermented whey, clearly a flavor profile only a Viking mother could love, and continues into a tale about outlawry, the ultimate timeout where offenders were sent into the highlands with no social safety net, not even a coupon for re-entry. Imagine today's influencers trying to livestream from a snow-swept lava field. ## banishment, but make it content. Yes, that's joke number 2 sneaking past the ravens. Steam thickens, beads of moisture drip from your eyelashes, and the saga swells into descriptions of heroic deeds. Suddenly you recall modern lawyers charging by the hour. Here, billing happens in cows. Somewhere in the crowd, a sheep bleats as if volunteering for the invoice. There's comedic timing even livestock can nail. The speaker's accidental third joke lands when he muffs a line, swapping seal with ship. So a statute against seal hunting becomes a ban on ship hunting. Polite Viking laughter ripples through the throng, and no one wants to harpoon their own transport as dusk settles. Soft gold light filters through drifting vapor, painting silhouettes on cliff faces. The Lawspeaker launches into Njál's saga excerpts to illustrate legal precedent. Think Supreme Court opinion but with more swordplay. Scholars debate whether these recital performances influenced the sagas later penned by monks or whether those texts already existed as cheat sheets for nervous speakers. Either way, you're witnessing a narrative incubator, the creative writing workshop of the Viking Age. Between verses, the crowd shuffles. Some spectators chew dried fish. Others pass wooden cups of birch sap tea, earthy, slightly sweet, definitely caffeine-free, which might explain why nobody's sprinting anywhere. You accept a sip, the warmth seeping down your throat like a friendly sauna elf. A raven swoops low, probably scouting for unattended snacks. You tuck your ration deeper into your cloak, unwilling to star in Raven Theft Auto, Medieval Edition. The wind swirls steam into pillowy towers that break apart and reform like daydreams. The speaker's steady rhythm hypnotizes you, each legal clause gliding into the next, punctuated by saga episodes where honor triumphs, fools stumble, and cows continue their cameo appearances. Bedtime tugs at your eyelids, yet curiosity keeps you tethered. Law, story, and theater stitched together with frost. Just before the sections end, you glance toward the hot spring bubbling like a cauldron of dragon breath. You fancy dropping in a modern bath bomb, but remember you'd probably invent the world's first sulfur-scented smoke grenade. Not exactly relaxing. Better keep the timeline intact. Historians would throw a fit, and dragon breath is already a tough spa treatment to market. The speaker pauses, setting down his pebble pouch with a ceramic clink, voice echoing against cliff walls. You exhale, cheeks warm, shoulders loosening as though the steam itself needs away tension. Somewhere, distant auroras hesitate to spark, the sky teasing with pale streaks, promising later spectacle. For now, you simply listen to the hush that invites dreams to tiptoe in. The hush lingers only a heartbeat before you feel the assembly breathe again. Collective lungs exhaling frosty clouds that mingle with the hot spring steam. You shuffle your wool cloak, still warm from that birch sap tea. Remember the sip that tasted like tree-flavored lullaby? And let your boots carry you toward a grassy shelf overlooking the Oxera River. A few hardy moss tufts peek through the volcanic gravel, and you realize the crowd is subtly rearranging itself for the next ritual. Informal disputing, or, in modern terms, the networking mixer where everybody says they totally read the agenda. A bearded farmer waves you closer, eager to vent about grazing boundaries. You nod sagely, pretending the map in your head is more detailed than left of the big rock. A mainstream historical fact drifts into focus. Each summer session of the Althing divided attendees into 4 quarter courts, with a 5th court for appeals, a structure scholars compare to a legal matryoshka doll, courts inside endless patience. Your new friend grumbles that the East Quarter keeps sneaking sheep across an imaginary line. You resist suggesting fluorescent traffic cones because, well, supply chain issues in 985 CE are no joke. Speaking of jokes, a raven perched on a basalt pillar coughs out a garbled croak that sounds suspiciously like billable hours. That's gag number 1, courtesy of nature's stand-up comedian. Nearby, a woman in a cobalt cloak kneels beside a shallow stone trench. She packs coarse rye dough into a small wooden box, then lowers it into a bubbling vent where the ground gurgles like a kettle left too long on. Quirky tidbit alert. Locals bake rugbrau rye bread by burying it in geothermal soil for 24 hours, resulting in dark, sweet loaves sometimes nicknamed Thunder Bread. Because, if you eat too much, the after-dinner acoustics can rival Thor's percussion section. You watch the box disappear, half tempted to slip in a sticky note that says, "Extra gluten, please." Steam rises, scenting the air with sulfur and faint molasses. Your stomach rumbles. Joke number 2 tiptoes in as you picture medieval Uber Eats delivering bread straight from Earth's crock-pot. Estimated arrival, 1 revolution of the sun, surge pricing payable in Eiderdown. You chuckle softly, trying not to draw attention from the Lawspeaker consulting with 3 gray-haired gore, chieftains acting as combo politicians, priests, and part-time weather forecasters. Their conversation carries on the wind. Talk of whether outlawry terms should last 3 winters or 5 for repeat offenders. Historians still argue whether these durations reflected practical exile logistics or were just flexible enough to accommodate notoriously short Icelandic summers. As debate ripples through the circle, you catch fragments about snowpack severity, pony endurance, and the newest trend in driftwood-carved sledges. Apparently last year's model weighed as much as a small house and handled like one, 2. The Lawspeaker returns to the low rock, voice settling into a lower register, almost as if he senses drowsiness cloaking the audience like nightfall. He recites passages from the future Gragas law code, though nobody calls it that yet, covering marriage contracts. You learn that betrothal gifts usually involve ornate brooches or, in a pinch, a moderately impressive walrus tusk. Joke number 3 flicks its tail when you imagine proposing today with a tusk instead of a diamond ring. Will you marry me? And also help haul this ivory to the reception? You glance again at the hot spring pool, its surface pulsing as bubbles break, each pop a gentle percussive lullaby. Somewhere behind you, a pair of children toss pebbles, counting ripples for fun because medieval screen time arrives only when auroras decide to stream their cosmic slideshow. One child brags about seeing a rainbow-hued arc last winter. The other counters with a boast about a meteor spark that sounded like a hammer on anvil. You quietly award them both first place. Kids' imaginations aren't limited by data plans. As twilight deepens, torchbearers light resinous pine splinters that flicker orange against cobalt sky. A hush falls while a storyteller, not the official law speaker but a visiting skald, steps forward to fill the legal recess with verse. He brandishes a carved harp small enough to sling across the shoulder like a fashionable Viking satchel. The first chord hums, the sagas flow again, yet this time the tone softens, focusing on journeys rather than slayings, perhaps sensing your eyelids weighing down like snow-laden branches. You catch a mainstream fact woven into the melody. Eric the Red's voyage to Greenland launched from Icelandic shores around 985, luring adventurous farmers with promises of fertile meadows that photoshopped away the glaciers. The skald tweaks the narrative, joking that Eric's marketing pamphlet forgot to mention the year-round chili filter lesson in advertising ethics, 10th century edition. Your grin forms without permission. Even your cheek muscles want in on the relaxation. The storyteller's harp notes glide over the steaming ridge, mingling with hissing vents so seamlessly it sounds like the earth itself strums back up. A fringe tidbit slips in. Certain folks swear that sometimes the geysers pulse exactly in rhythm with a poem's meter. Proof, they insist, that subterranean spirits clap along. Historians still argue whether this is coincidence, selective memory, or just that humans can find patterns in last week's laundry pile. You lean toward coincidence but secretly hope the planet is humming along. Why not? Beats paying concert admission from the corner of your eye. You spot the farmer with boundary woes tucking a parchment scrap into his belt. Apparently the informal negotiations produced a compromise. 2 extra grazing days after midsummer, provided he sends a celebratory wheel of smoked cheese to his rival. You file that under legal victories fueled by dairy, next to last section's butter barrel compensation. The callback tickles you. Medieval Iceland truly runs on lactose and loopholes. Wind sneaks down the valley, carrying a briny tang from the distant sea. The temperature drop nudges you nearer to a cluster of lava rocks still warm from afternoon sun. You sit, letting residual heat seep into your legs like an underfloor radiator designed by trolls. The torchlight flickers across faces turned peaceful, lulled into that fuzzy mental state where details blur into comforting hum. The skald's final chord fades, and for a moment only the gentle boiling of earth and the soft crackle of pine resin remain. You close your eyes, hearing footfalls as people drift to tents stitched from sailcloth and shaggy sheepskin. Somewhere, a flute begins a slow, circular melody. It's either an impromptu lullaby or someone practicing scales while everyone else's ears serve as unwilling audience. Yet even that off-key note feels charming in this place where hospitality is law and bedtime is communal theater. Beneath your cloak, warmth pools like golden honey. You picture that rye loaf slowly baking underground, absorbing minerals minute by minute. You decide if you return tomorrow, you'll claim a slice, drizzle it with skyr, maybe barter a story for an extra hunk. The plan drifts lazily in your mind, rocking like a boat tethered in calm harbor. Torches gutter lower, stars emerge overhead, and the first hint of aurora teases in the north, a pale smudge that promises an emerald curtain later tonight. You let the sky's anticipation match your own slow inhale, then release the breath, feeling any leftover tension leak out like air from a gently deflating bellows. You are here, beside steaming waters, under the vast chill of twilight, wrapped in ancient words that roll like lullabies across a millennium. Night deepens like ink poured slow and deliberate across the sky, Yet you keep wandering the volcanic flats of Thingvellir, guided by torch stubs and the first shy ribbons of aurora that flutter green, then fade as if embarrassed by their own brilliance. Your boots crunch over frost-dusted lava gravel. Each step sounds like distant applause for a performance you haven't quite rehearsed. A raven shadows you from boulder to boulder. Apparently you've gained a feathered roadie since earlier, and yes, there's joke number 1. The original push notification system, complete with cawtone and absolutely zero mute option. You pause by the riverside where steam hovers a handspan above water, creating a perfect mirror that turns the sky upside down. Reflected constellations wink at you, as if reminding you to blink once in a while. The hush here is deeper than the crowd's earlier lull. Yet you still hear muffled chatter drifting from canvas and sheepskin tents pitched in rough semicircles. Every campfire glows like an emberlit pearl, each one a miniature parliament where disputes shrink to gossip and gossip melts into bedtime yarns your stomach growls. Apparently the Thunderbread is still 12 hours from finish line, so you sidle toward a tent where the scent of smoked lamb curls irresistibly. A youth stirs a cauldron dangling on an iron tripod and hands you a wedge of meat wrapped in birch bark. Mainstream historical fact time. Icelanders relied heavily on sheep husbandry. Grazing rights were precious enough to warrant entire subclauses in the very laws you heard thundered from the low rock. You nibble, savoring the peppery crust, and nearly forget the world beyond the fire's mellow halo. Even the raven eyes the morsel with the longing of a bird who missed dinner. Too bad, Featherface, you spent that opportunity mocking my notifications. Inside the tent sits the Lawspeaker himself, voice hoarse after hours of saga slinging. His scarlet cloak now hangs over a wooden peg, steam rising from the damp wool. You notice he massages his throat with a concoction of honey and ground angelica root. A quirky tidbit your modern throat lozenge would envy. He waves you closer, placing his pebble pouch. Remember the chink-chink metronome? Beside a horn cup of mead that smells like fermented sunshine. A smile rolls across his weather-battered features. Our words traveled far today, he murmurs. Farther than the skis of winter. You nod, unsure whether skis existed here yet, but it sounds poetic enough for a sleepy head nod. Soon two gore duck into the tent, towing news hotter than any geyser. Ships have arrived in the western fjords carrying envoys of King Olaf Tryggvason of Norway, pressing Iceland to embrace Christianity. Mainstream fact number 2, because knowledge is like layer cake. Always room for another slice. In the year 1000, Iceland adopted Christianity at the Althing, swayed by political pressure as much as divine epiphany. Your ears perk. The Gore debate strategy: should they support the new faith publicly, oppose it, or pull the classic Viking move of shrugging and offering to trade? Historians still argue whether the final decision hinged on one pivotal speech by a later lawspeaker named Orgir or whether merchant pragmatism simply outvoted theology. You sit cross-legged, feeling the tremor of decision time vibrating beneath the lava floorboards. Sarcasm slips in like a mischievous draugar. Imagine tomorrow's meeting agenda labeled, Item 1. Choose official religion. Item 2. Lunch. That's joke number 2. Politely bowing as it strolls across the tent. The lawspeaker, oblivious to your inner commentary, unrolls a calfskin scroll bearing new draft clauses that would let pagans keep private shrines if they promise, hand on tusk, no public sacrifices. You mentally high-five yourself for the callback. Didn't we just talk marriage proposals with walrus ivory? Clearly tusks are trending harder than pumpkin spice lattes. A sudden hiss outside signals that a geyser has erupted. Not the high sky piercer of the modern tourist reel, but a respectable 6-foot spray that showers the tent roof with sizzling droplets. Water drums a staccato lullaby overhead, and for a fleeting moment, everyone inside pauses as though the earth itself just clinked a glass to toast the ongoing negotiations. Someone cracks joke number 3, musing that if the ground insists on spontaneous baptisms, maybe conversion is inevitable. Even the raven utters an approving croak from the crossbeam. Conversation mellows. You sip the honey mead, tasting wildflowers captured last midsummer, bottled sunshine that now slides like velvet down your throat. Sleepiness unfurls inside you, heavy yet comforting, like wearing all your winter sweaters at once because the laundry basket staged a protest. The lawspeaker rummages beneath a fur throw and retrieves a small board etched with runes. He traces them with a calloused finger, explaining that some families carve yearly annals, proto-diaries, into driftwood, then trade pieces as keepsakes. Quirky tidbit number 2. Certain collectors claim driftwood from across the Atlantic brings luck, leading folks to guard splintered planks the way modern fans treasure limited edition vinyl. You step outside again, leaving the warm glow behind, drawn to the aurora which now pulses brighter. Green veils ripple, then swirl into purple edges like watercolor spilled across black parchment. You lie back on a slab of soft moss, spine cushioned, eyes skylocked. Steam from nearby vents wafts across your face, giving you the free spa treatment your earlier geyser didn't quite manage, though still no cucumber slices, sorry. The chill nibbles at fingertips, so you lace hands behind your head, tucking them beneath the cloak for warmth. Remember that tree-flavored birch sap tea? A kettle whistles at a neighboring camp, tugging scent memories across the air and into your nostrils. You picture the loaf of rye still cocooned underground, sugar caramelizing slow, and vow to set an alarm rooster, version 1.0 crow alert, to claim a slice come dawn. Across the plain, laughter drifts. Someone is leading a midnight stretch routine they dub Viking yoga. You watch silhouettes wobbling through downward goat and shield wall pose, countless cloaks fluttering like friendly bats. The raven on the boulder radiates judgment, though even it tilts its head in what might be avian curiosity. You decide not to join. You're already perfectly horizontal, and gravity is hugging you too lovingly to let go as you breathe. The river's murmur aligns with your heartbeat. The land hums. Maybe the old stories are right and those subterranean spirits keep metronome for all above. Your mind floats to that scholarly debate about pebble ritual standardization, capital letters purely for comedic pomp. Did every Lawspeaker rattle stones? Or was it this guy's personal brand? Suddenly you catch yourself forming marketing slogans. Pebble tech, memory you can throw. Yeah, you're definitely tired. Torches dwindle to embers. A hush folds over Thingvellir and tucks it in. The aurora dims, like stage lights fading. You hear distant hooves. A latecomer rides in from the south, perhaps carrying yet another scroll of urgent politics. You sympathize, everyone else is prepping for a nap while he's stuck in rush-hour fjord traffic. The rider dismounts, horse snorts a hello, and the pair vanish behind ridge shadow. Your eyelids shutter half-mast, vision blurring into soft color trails. Warmth from thermal stones rises through your cloak, up spine, into shoulder blades where tension once camped. You remember the thunder bread, the pebble pouch, the law that banned ship hunting. Seriously, poor seals are relieved, and all these details stitch into a quilt of comfort. Tomorrow will bring debates about gods and geysers, but tonight belongs to hush, to heartbeat, to steam that curls like whispered punctuation around every fading sound. You sink deeper, listening for nothing in particular, content to let the night carry you like driftwood on a moonlit tide. Outside time, outside worry, you float on lava-forged earth, woven into the ancient hush. A pale cobalt sheen creeps along the eastern horizon, nudging you from that sweet spot between dozing and dreaming, where thoughts melt like snowflakes on a forge. You stretch beneath your cloak, joints murmuring protest but also thanking you for skipping downward goat last night. Joke number 1 waves hello, limber as ever. Ravens trade sleepy caws from a basalt ledge, as if gossiping about whose feathers look worst at dawn. Steam still coils from fissures, but cooler morning air folds itself over Thingvellir, draping the valley in a shawl of mist that glows peach at the edges. You push upright just in time to see a handful of early risers shuffling toward the baking pit. Someone taps the earth with a driftwood stick, prying up a wooden box now crusted in mineral frost. Out wafts the caramel scent of vergbrow. Remember? Thunderbread. The geothermal loaf with the built-in percussion section? A woman slices it open, revealing a dense, mahogany interior so moist it could moonlight as cake. She hands you a slab thicker than a saga chapter, slathers on tangy skyr, and passes a drizzle of birch syrup. Mainstream historical fact riding shotgun. Skyr, that protein-packed dairy darling, has been spooned in Iceland since the settlement period, long before modern gym rats started hashtagging it. The first bite lands like breakfast fireworks, sweet, sour, smoky, causing your taste buds to applaud louder than last night's raven notifications. Joke number 2, sachets by whispering that if granola bars tasted this good, hikers would never reach base camp. You close your eyes to savor, feeling bread warmth spread from tongue to toes, a geothermal hug meant for internal plumbing. Morning activity swells. Tents unzip, well untie, revealing chieftains rubbing sleep from eyes still lined with charcoal eyeliner, because even Vikings appreciate a smoky look now and then. Smoke from campfires hoists a light gray column skyward. It mingles with steam so seamlessly it's hard to tell where breakfast ends and geology begins. A low horn moans 3 notes. Call back to the rider you spotted near midnight. Turns out he carries new edicts from the western fjords. The Lawspeaker, scarlet cloak freshly dried, strides toward the low rock, pebble pouch bouncing at his hip like an eager puppy. You fall into step beside a cluster of farmers comparing early lamb weights. Apparently this spring's grass started late, meaning knitwear production might slip, and the island's export of fine wadmal cloth could feel the pinch. Quirky tidbit surfaces. Some weavers secretly weave tiny personal runes into cloaks to ward off moths. Skeptics argue the runes work about as well as modern, do-not-eat, silica packets. Historians still argue whether such textile talismans were widespread folk practice or just vanity projects for fashion-forward gore at the Low Rock. The Lawspeaker clears his throat, gingerly. You can almost taste yesterday's honey angelica elixir still coating those vocal cords. He raises one hand and announces the main event. Today's quarter courts will hear grievances, including a boundary dispute so tangled that rumor claims even the sheep can't decide whose side they're on. Joke number 3 herds itself in, visualizing ovine mediators wearing tiny wigs. The crowd settles onto tussock benches. You snag a spot near a low, steam-washed boulder that doubles as a heated seat, nature's ergonomic office chair. Proceedings begin with a recital from the Icelandic, the Book of the Icelanders, recently compiled by Ari Orgilsson, that monk scholar with a memory like 20 pebble pouches. Mainstream fact on parade. Ari's work lays down the chronology of settlements, volcanic eruptions, and not-so-humble brag notes about family trees stretching back to Norway. The Lawspeaker quotes a passage detailing how sailors navigated by hugging sea ice, a technique that feels equal parts courageous and GPS. Who? You can't help picturing a modern driver's complaint, recalculating into a glacier. As the legal drama unfolds, you notice a slender young woman beside you sketching furiously on calfskin with a sharpened piece of charcoal. She explains she's crafting an illuminated margin for her family's law scroll. Tiny dolphins leaping over every paragraph about fishing rights, because why not add some aquatic flair to legislature? She winks, noting that if the dolphin doodles catch on, she might corner the decorative legal market. Callback delights. Maybe she'll team up with the driftwood rune enthusiasts and start an Etsy but make it Viking marketplace. Arguments in front of the court ramp from calm to volcanic quicker than a geyser misfire. 2 farmers debate fence markers, one swearing he set stones east of the crooked birch, the other insisting they were west by 3 goat lengths. Scholars still argue whether such goat-based measurements were standardized or if everyone eyeballed whatever goat strolled closest. The judges, gore arrayed like stoic bookends, consult, then issue compromise. The crooked birch will host a fresh rune inscription indicating midway. They cap things by assigning each farmer 2 months of shared herding duty, thus ensuring mutual goat supervision. You smirk, remembering the earlier vision of wigged sheep. Maybe those goats can rock powdered horns. 2, around midday, a chill breeze shreds the mist, revealing distant snow-clad peaks. Vendors seize the sunbreak, unloading wares, walrus bone combs, soapstone bowls, even a few imported glass beads rumored to ride the same trade routes that once ferried silks to Byzantium. You finger a cobalt bead, cold as river ice, and mull its journey. Boat, horse, maybe even backpack of a wide-eyed pilgrim. Quirky tidbit plops down. Some beads arrive as ship ballast, apparently the medieval version of packing peanuts. Colorful, reusable, and occasionally doubling as currency when captains feel spirited. Your stomach suggests another snack. Thunderbread only lasts so long, so you trade a bead for a sliver of whale fat candle that's been rolled in angelica seeds. Chew on it like gum, locals say, to keep lungs soothed in sulfur air. The texture is interesting, equal parts chapstick and chewing wax, but hey, when in Iceland. Joke number 2.5 hops in, musing that modern breath mints would be jealous of this rugged branding. Now with 100% whale blubber freshness, the afternoon sun arcs low, gilding lava ridges in copper. Court adjourns, and once again communal sagas spill across the field like mead from an overeager toast. The Lawspeaker announces tomorrow's schedule, a decisive vote on the Christian question. You feel collective shoulders tighten, then relax. The promise of hot spring baths tonight soothes pre-referendum nerves. You, too, are ready for water that won't judge you for daydreaming goat wigs. You follow others to a shallow pool ringed with smooth stones where temperature sits at that sweet spot between bubble tea and don't cook the traveler. Cloaks drop, tunics loosen. Steam veils modesty as bodies slide in, sighs echoing like wind in sailcloth. Mainstream fact floats to surface. Bathing here isn't just leisure, it's diplomacy. Deals ink themselves in condensation above calm water, many recorded later as entire saga chapters. You settle thigh-deep, letting warmth seep through muscle and memory until you're more noodle than mortal. Someone hums an old seafarer's lullaby. Notes tumble across the pool, catching in your hair like drifting snowflakes. Another person recounts a fringe superstition. If you submerge ears while auroras dance, you'll hear Valkyries polishing armor beneath the earth. Historians still argue whether such tales acted as proto-parental warnings. Don't dunk your head too long, kid, or battle maidens will give you tinnitus. You decide to test it anyway, easing under, listening. Only water, heartbeat, and the faint echo of your earlier goat wig joke splashing back. You emerge, droplets racing down nose tip, and laugh quietly. The day's weight glides off you like kelp from an otter's belly. An image that counts as bonus joke number 3 because otters in Viking helmets deserve screen time. Glow lingers on peaks. Conversations soften to murmurs. Pebbles click as the Lawspeaker returns to camp. Maybe he's counting clauses learned. Maybe sheep. Maybe things he'll miss if tomorrow's religion vote steers new tides. Your eyes half close. Steam, sunlight, and distant gull cries knit a lullaby shawl around flesh and bone. Tomorrow's choices will stir, but for now water cradles you. Bread hums in your belly, and legal dramas evaporate into sky just as the valley glows with first evening ember. Evening eases in like a cat deciding whether your lap is worthy. Slow, deliberate, and impossible to ignore once it settles. You step out of the bath, skin flushed lobster pink, hair smelling faintly of minerals and victory over goosebumps. Someone hands you a fresh wadmal towel, and you wrap yourself like a burrito that forgot the salsa. Steam trails off your shoulders in wisps. If only social media existed, you'd hashtag Spotty930, but for now you just savor the hush. Joke number 1 pokes its head out, remarking that at least nobody has invented post-bath selfies yet. No filters can fix geothermal chic. Back at the campsite, a long fire trench burns with driftwood logs that popped ashore after flirting with Greenland's coast. Sparks climb up into deepening cobalt, each one a failed audition for the Aurora's headline act. You plop onto a sealskin mat, thunderbread still humming in your belly like a bass drum that refuses to pack up. Nearby, the Lawspeaker's pebble pouch lies open, stones spread in neat rows as though rehearsing tiny battle formations. Remember that rhythmic chink-chink? Tonight the pebbles rest. Tomorrow they'll clatter like castanets during the religion vote. A cook ladles a stew the consistency of optimistic porridge. Lamb, barley, and, rumor claims, a dash of seabird eggs for texture. Mainstream historical fact rides in on that spoon. Icelandic diets balanced land with sea, so eggs from puffin nests often thicken soups when glaciers bullied farmland. You blow on the spoon, sip, and taste salt wind plus faint fish undertones. Not unpleasant, just surprising, like discovering your favorite podcast host moonlights as a juggler. Conversation circles the fire like ravens eyeing leftovers. A wiry trader boasts he's seen King Olaf's missionaries wearing silk stoles embroidered with gold crosses, blindingly shiny endorsements of salvation. He pulls out a palm-sized Thor's hammer amulet and flips it. On the other side glitters a tiny cross. Quirky tidbit alert. Some Icelanders hedged bets by crafting reversible pendants. Flip for thunder, flip again for resurrection, accessorize for every occasion. You grin, picturing influencers promoting convertible bling with a discount code, A hush falls as the Lawspeaker clears his throat, still tender, sounding like gravel softly stirred, and begins recounting precedent. If we split over gods, he murmurs, the island may split over everything. He speaks of earthquakes that rumble under the Rift Valley, reminding folks that the land literally pulls itself apart. Perhaps people shouldn't help. Historians still argue whether his rhetoric tomorrow will echo this quiet fireside reasoning or whether he'll improvise a brand new mic drop moment at sunrise. Either way, you hear weight in his tone heavier than your cloak after a geyser shower. Someone passes a skin of mead. You take a swig and almost sneeze bubbles. Fermentation fizz tickles your sinuses. Joke number 2 stumbles forward, suggesting medieval carbonated beverages might be why Norse helmets never needed visors. Burping protection sorted. You wipe foam with your sleeve, noting the faint taste of mountain thyme. The brew warms belly and thought alike, and talk loosens. People swap news of walrus hunting grounds, soapstone trade rates, and the rumor that a monstrous scata fish off the northern coast sings at moonrise. No one agrees on the tune. Across the flames, you spot our dolphin-doodling scribe from court earlier. She's hunched over a scrap of vellum, sketching the Lawspeaker under a halo of stylized steam plumes. She winks when she catches your eye, gesturing that tomorrow's chronicle will need illustrations of pebble choreography. Apparently legal ballet is trending. You promise her a fresh slice of thunder bread for the first sketch featuring goat wigs. Artistic integrity has its carbs. A wind gust prowls through camp, whipping sparks sideways. Cloaks flap like sails finding a sudden gale. You shiver, tugging wool tighter, and recall the Angelica root throat tonic. Perhaps you should brew some for yourself. If it can rescue a Lawspeaker's larynx, maybe it can guard your vocal cords from night air that feels like licking a glacier. You tuck this idea away next to invent pocket warmers on your mental to-do list. Stories resume. An elderly woman with braids silver as Frost recites a stanza from Voluspa, foretelling Ragnarok but pausing to comment that the part about wolves eating the sun feels exaggerated. Otherwise, she jokes, we'd all need bigger parasols. That sly grin earns laughter. Joke number 3 waltzes by, politely tipping its helmet. Yet beneath the humor lies a tremor. You feel everyone weighing omens, from volcanic rumbles to political envoys. The stew bubbles louder, as though agreeing change is inevitable, but dinner must go on. The sky blossoms with aurora, brighter than last night. Green curtains rippling, violet rims sparking at the edges. You remember dunking your ears to eavesdrop on Valkyries and decide to try again. But the stew pot isn't quite big enough, and scalding soup is rarely a good listening device. Instead you tilt back, neck resting on bundled cloak, and let lights weave across pupils. They move so slowly they lull you, like cosmic knitting needles looping endless yarn. Around you, folks tuck into bedrolls. One man arranges driftwood sticks at his slumbering son's feet. Superstition claims it wards nightmares, the spooky sleep horses that trample dreams. Scholars still argue whether this ritual began as genuine charm or a clever way to teach children geometry before breakfast. You decide, charm or not, it's less cumbersome than sleeping with a reversible pendant pressed into your forehead. The fire drops to embers. You rake a few closer for warmth. Your eyes flutter, half mesmerized by glowing coals that pulse like dragon hearts. The Lawspeaker unfurls a sealskin scroll filled with names of delegates expected to vote. He double-checks counts, nudging little groups of pebbles into clusters of 10. It strikes you how fragile big decisions look at midnight. Just stones, names, and one man's tired eyes. You wonder if Thunderbread will headline tomorrow's breakfast again, maybe laced with celebratory berries depending on the deity tally. That loaf has become your edible timeline marker. Pre-vote crumb, post-vote crust. Somewhere another raven croaks, sounding suspiciously like it's saying amen, or maybe poor men. Tough to tell with avian accents. You grin, nestling deeper into sealskin, clutching the reversible pendant gifted by the trader. Why not ensure spiritual security? Wind softens, embers dim, voices hush. Far off, a geyser sighs, releasing a plume that glows ghost green under aurora light. Breath by breath, you sink to the valley's rhythm. Inhale with steam rise, exhale with spark fade. Muscles unclench, eyelids slide closed. Tomorrow promises history book heft. But in this moment you cradle warmth, stories, and just enough mead to make the stars wobble pleasantly. The cat of evening, fully settled now, purrs against the rift walls. You drift, confident that whatever banner the island raises come dawn, there will still be bread to butter, goats to knit for, and ravens to supply unsolicited commentary. Dawn sneaks in sideways. Peach and rose seeping through the tent seems like gossip too juicy to wait for breakfast. You blink awake, eyelids sticky with campfire residue and the dried tears of yesterday's onion-laden stew. Don't worry, we're calling it emotional seasoning. Joke number 1 does a little jazz hands routine because yes, even onions know how to tug heartstrings. Outside, frost etches silver filigree on every pebble, turning the Lawspeakers' pouch, now knotted beside his sleeping mat, into a glittering clutch worthy of any Viking runway. You roll out of your sealskin cocoon, stretch, and immediately feel the thermal stones underfoot radiate gentle heat. Nature's floor heating system? 5 stars would recommend, though installation involves tectonic plates instead of a how-to video. People gather with that deliberate hush unique to mornings holding history by the lapels. Cloaks wrap tighter, breath puffs mingle with steam, and the scent of fresh thunderbread wafts across camp. A new batch, dug up at dawn, waits on a flat slab. You snag a slice, noticing someone has pressed a tiny cross into half the loaves and a Thor's hammer into the other half. Multi-faith carbs, because inclusivity starts with breakfast. Mainstream historical fact sidles over. The Christian conversion was famously resolved through compromise, allowing private pagan practice for a time, which basically translates to believe what you like, just don't sacrifice goats in the town square. You nod, dunk bread into warm whey and chew, tasting diplomacy in crumb form. A young boy races past screaming, Thingvalar, not a battle cry, just child shorthand for courts in session. He's carrying a miniature wooden gavel his father carved overnight from driftwood ballast. Quirky tidbit. Anyone? Kids sometimes role-played court to practice public speaking, though their verdicts usually sentenced dolls to mud puddles. You grin, imagining the dolls filing appeals with the 5th mud court. Near the low rock, benches form concentric arcs. You claim a seat on the lava-heated boulder from yesterday. Remember nature's ergonomic chair? And wrap your cloak like a burrito 2.0. The Lawspeaker appears, scarlet cloak snapping in the breeze, voice still gravelly yet resolute. He lifts the pebble pouch, letting stones rattle a prelude, then pours them into a wooden bowl carved with intertwining dragons and vines. A design that screams, graphic design is my passion, circa 1000 C. Today, he begins, we choose a path that keeps Iceland one hearth, not 2 camps. His words roll slow, deliberate, as if he's kneading dough rather than laws. Historians still argue whether Orgir, yes, that's actually tomorrow's guy, borrowed this rhetoric from earlier speeches or if our current Lawspeakers scriptwriter deserves royalty checks. Either way, suspense crackles louder than the frost underfoot. Delegate after delegate rises. You hear appeals to trade. Embracing Christianity could strengthen ties with Norway, balanced against warnings that abandoning Thor might risk thunderbread tasting less thunderous. Joke number 2 struts in wearing a baker's hat. Imagine a world where lightning strikes your loaf because you forgot the ceremonial hammer stamp. You stifle a laugh that emerges as a hiccup, quickly disguised as throat clearing. A merchant brandishes those silk stoles with shining crosses, letting them flutter in the breeze like spiritual flags. He claims baptism comes with reduced tariffs. Never underestimate the persuasive power of coupon codes, even in the Viking Age. Another chieftain counters, pointing toward the Rift Valley. The earth already splits. Let's not split our souls. You chew your last bread crust thoughtfully, noting how both sides wield geology like a PowerPoint slide. Amid the debate, our dolphin-doodling scribe sketches frantic strokes on vellum, cresting waves around each speaker's portrait. She flashes you a grin, mouthing goat wigs next. Proving callbacks are the adhesive binding reality to whimsy. Suddenly, a gust of wind snatches one silk stole skyward. It drifts, lands on the raven that's been your feathered push notification system since day one. The bird flaps, annoyed, now sporting a shiny cross cape like a superhero grappling with brand identity. The crowd chuckles. There's joke number 3, courtesy of accidental cosplay. Even the Lawspeaker pauses, lips twitching before solemnity reins him back. Debate resumes. But you drift slightly, mind replaying last night's elder scoffing at Ragnarok's sun-eating wolves. You imagine those wolves showing up now, finding the sky already occupied by a silk-clad raven and deciding to reschedule the apocalypse. Somehow the thought relaxes you. Cosmic calendars are clearly overbooked. Time passes. A blur of steam wisps, murmured arguments, and pebble tallies shifted from one bowl section to another. Mainstream fact number 2 pops in. Iceland's legal tradition valued consensus so deeply that violent enforcement of the conversion decision was minimal, a rarity in medieval Europe's religious tug-of-wars. You note how even the most passionate delegates keep swords sheathed, hands instead fiddling with reversible pendants like worry stones as midday sun glints off nearby pools. The Lawspeaker signals final statements. He rises, picks a single pebble, and holds it between finger and thumb for all to see. Silence blankets the assembly so thoroughly you can hear water droplets sizzle where molten stone grazes snow. One law, he intones, for the peace of all. He places the pebble into the Christian side of the bowl, then methodically pushes a handful of stones after it. Gasps flutter, but resistance feels more exhale than roar. Delegates follow suit, dropping pebbles like gentle rain into the chosen half. A few stones click into the pagan bowl, a quiet dissent respected, not punished. The vote ends. The bowl tilts heavily toward the cross, yet the hammer side still rattles dignity. You inhale, aware that a continent away crusades brew, but here a hush wraps the valley, thick as steam, fragile as soapstone. Scholars will later debate whether this calm acceptance stemmed from practical trade instincts, fear of Norwegian fleets, or genuine theological pivot. But for now you witness decisions settling like snow. With verdict rendered, the Lawspeaker announces 3 accommodations. Private pagan rituals may persist. Eating horse meat, a sacred offering, will cease publicly. Infant exposure practices must stop altogether. Quirky tidbit whispers. Some families secretly salted horse steaks for generations after, testing whether thunder or salvation would comment. You squint skyward. No lightning, just the raven still wearing its silk cape, apparently unbothered by dietary restrictions. Cheers neither erupt nor whimper. The valley exhales a long, unified breath. Someone strikes a harp chord, tentative, as if tuning the new era. Others unfurl barrels of Brennivin, Black Death schnapps, for a toast that requires neither thunder nor sainthood, just healthy liver courage. You sip a shallow slug. It tastes like caraway seeds doing jazzercise on your tongue. Warmth races outward, dissolving tension like snowflakes on a forge. Yes, we've come full circle. The Lawspeaker, voice softer now, invites everyone to share evening feasts. Let bread break faster than friendships. You approve this motto, file it next to Pebbletech memory you can throw, and consider trademark potential. Afternoon shadows lengthen. Cloaks loosen, laughter returns, and you realize human routines. Eat, joke, nap, outlast deity logos. Joke number 4, bonus track. Sachets in. Same Thunderbread, new branding. You stifle giggles behind your cup, noticing the scribe scribbling that very line in the margin. Dolphin initials included. Steam curls skyward in slow pirouettes as hot springs hiss their non-judgmental applause. The raven finally shrugs off its silk cape, which flutters downward onto a sleeping goat. Prophecy fulfilled. Goat wig fashion line, courtesy of gravity and divine fabric. You applaud softly, witness to comedic destiny. Under a mellow sun you feel fatigue seep from marrow. Adrenaline drains, leaving that satisfying emptiness akin to finishing a novel and flipping back to page 1 just to caress the cover. You rise, stretch, and wander toward the river, letting cool mist kiss cheeks warm with Brennivin. Behind you, Pebble Bowl is lifted high, stones clinking. A new lullaby signaling work done, rest earned. You crouch at water's edge, dip fingers, watch ripples carry morning's tensions downstream until they vanish beneath draping moss. Tomorrow, practicalities begin, replacing carved idols with crosses, maybe carving crosses onto existing idols to save woodwork hours. But tonight, auroras will swirl as always, goats will practice runway walks in silk, and Thunderbread will bake underground. Loyal to no creed but caramelization. You smile, shoulders uncoiling, as the river hums agreement. Celebration unfurls across Thingvellir like a tapestry someone forgot to hem, bright threads of chatter and music fraying pleasantly in every direction. You drift among clusters of revelers, cloak flapping just enough to feel heroic without tripping over your own hems. Joke number 1 politely curtsies, because fashion emergencies know no era. The valley's usual palette of earthy browns and basalt blacks now glimmers with borrowed color. Those silk stoles the missionaries brought are being repurposed into banners, belts, and yes, encore goat wigs. Apparently the goat from earlier strutted its catwalk so well that owners are charging viewing fees. Near the low rock, a makeshift choir practices hymns translated into stumbling Old Norse. The melody lilts over the hot spring hiss, colliding with the familiar twang of a skald's harp tuned for pagan praise. The resulting mashup sounds like 2 radio stations arguing in perfect harmony. Mainstream historical fact drifts through the chords. Early Icelandic Christians adapted their poetic meters, the fornarislag, for liturgical verse, proof that even salvation bows to local rhyme schemes. You tap a toe, half to the beat, half to prevent it from freezing in the crisp evening air. A trader waves you over, holding a bucket that looks suspiciously like a repurposed helmet. Inside slosh silver trout, their scales reflecting aurora sparks. He claims, here comes the quirky tidbit, that tonight's fish will be baptized before broiling, so their souls swim straight to heaven's buffet. You raise an eyebrow. He swears it's good luck marinade. Scholars still argue whether such fishy piety ever happened or if it's the medieval equivalent of comedic clickbait, but the idea of sanctified seafood earns a smirk and maybe a second helping. You wander toward the boiling pools where pots of skyr stew burble beside slabs of sizzling mutton. A woman sprinkles crushed angelica seeds onto the meat, leaning in to whisper that the herb wards off plague and political hangovers. Mainstream medical science of the era agrees angelica fought scurvy, though whether it can cure referendum fatigue remains open to double-blind saga trials. Joke number 2 waddles in wearing a doctor's cloak, promising, take 2 sprigs and call me when the next kingdom annexes you. Steam fogs your lashes, so you wipe them with a sleeve already crusted in crumbs of thunderbread, caramel flecks shining like tiny amber runes. Remember the reversible pendant tucked inside your tunic? It warms against your chest, perhaps savoring the irony of being carried through a victory feast that technically retired half its identity. You glance at others. Some wear crosses openly now, others let Thor's hammer peek from necklines like shy neighbors sharing a driveway, and nobody seems eager to measure pendant length like modern status battles. A sudden commotion ripples near the riverbank. You slip through the crowd to find missionaries, robes damp, smiles nervous, preparing the first public baptisms. They line wooden tubs with sheepskins to soften the chill, ladling river water still steaming from geothermal tributaries. One cleric dips a carved ladle. The thing looks more cauldron than spoon, eliciting joke number 3. Go big or go pagan. You bite your tongue to keep the laugh inside, not wanting to spook the penitent. Participants cue politely. A weather-beaten fisherman, a milkmaid who keeps surreptitiously patting her Thor amulet for luck, even the pebble-counting Lawspeaker himself. He steps forward, kneels, and accepts water over his head. Droplets purl in his beard like morning frost. The crowd murmurs approval. You sense the weight of example setting, that invisible peer pressure that could hoist glaciers if it had arms. Yet the moment stays oddly gentle, more like adding a chapter to an ongoing saga than ripping out old pages. You crouch near the edge, skimming fingers through water gone lukewarm. Beneath the surface, volcanic sand glitters. You recall the Lawspeakers' earlier warning about the land splitting underfoot and think, maybe compromise is the only stable bridge across such cracks. Mainstream fact number 2 surfaces. Archaeological soil cores show that shortly after the conversion, many pagan temple sites were quietly adapted into churches, often retaining original stone foundations. Recycling at its holiest. The choir's hybrid hymn reaches a wistful climax, and suddenly someone launches a fireworks-free cheer so big it startles the raven still perched above, now minus cape but still brimming with judgment. The bird flaps down, snatches a breadcrumb from a child's palm, and flutters off to heckle another corner of the feast. You mark the callback. The raven remains your personal push notification, apparently neutral on matters of eternity but firmly pro-snack. Night thickens, auroras braid green and lilac ribbons overhead. Fires reflect those colors, licking pots with rainbow flames. A youth passes cups of malt ale spiced with juniper. The first sip tastes like a forest decided to throw a tea party. You savor, letting warmth travel spineward. People exchange toasts for everything: new faith, old friendships, minor goat settlements, because Icelandic law may be settled but Icelandic appetite is a perpetual open case. Nearby, a circle forms around two storytellers facing off in what might be history's sleepiest rap battle. Alternating stanzas from pagan myth and Christian lore, each line met with respectful ooze. You lean in to catch phrases comparing Thor's hammer to St. Michael's sword. The crowd votes by tossing pebbles toward whichever side's metaphors resonate. Ultimately, the pile ends tied, prompting the storytellers to hug it out, proving that rhetorical duels here come with mandatory cool-down cuddles. You notice the dolphin-doodling scribe perched on a stool, capturing the baptism scene. She's added miniature halos above fish in the bucket. Creative liberties delight you. You whisper about the goat's accidental silk wig runway, and she sketches a cameo in the corner. Goat beneath divine disco lights, thunderbread as turntables. The prospect of tomorrow's readers discovering such Easter eggs makes you chuckle softly. The missionaries wrap baptisms by blessing the river itself, sprinkling salt and murmuring Latin that drifts like foreign snowflakes across warm steam. Scholars still argue whether such blessings impacted water use rights later encoded into law. Were baptized fish off-limits on Fridays, or did local loopholes declare geothermal stew exempt? The debate reminds you that every spiritual revelation hits a bureaucratic speed bump eventually. Stomachs full, voices hoarse, the crowd disperses toward tents glowing amber. You trail behind, knees grateful for earlier hot spring soak, and let the night breathe around you. At your own sleeping nook, you spread your cloak, gaze skyward one last time. Auroras swirl slower now, as if the sky, too, is digesting a heavy feast. You feel the pendant resting between collarbones, balancing cross and hammer like two children on a seesaw finally agreeing on a rhythm. Before closing eyes, you craft a mental checklist. Tomorrow visit stall that sells soapstone bowls, you've broken two. Barter leftover juniper ale for another slice of thunder bread, and thank the raven for its service, perhaps with an unsalted fish, post-baptism, of course. Joke number 4. Bonus because festivities deserve overtime. Whispers that the bird is drawing up a union contract demanding snack breaks every saga stanza. You smile, tuck arms beneath the sealskin, and let the new era hush settle across Thingvellir. Steam rises, breath slows, and your heartbeat finds the tempo of distant geysers, steady, unwavering, like law itself, no matter whose name tops the letterhead. Mid-morning sunlight tiptoes over the rift like it's late for chapel, spilling honey across tents still drowsy from last night's hymn and harp mashup. You blink awake in your sealskin cocoon, cheeks tasting of juniper ale fumes and new faith afterglow. A goat wearing its now famous silk wig pokes its head through the flap, snorts judgment, and trots off. Joke number 1 stretches, bows, and assures you that even livestock keep tabs on your snooze button. You crawl outside, discovering camp already humming with purpose. Overnight, someone staked 4 driftwood beams into a rough rectangle south of the Low Rock. Today's project, the first official church frame. Mainstream historical fact strolls up with a clipboard. Iceland's earliest churches were modest turf and driftwood huts, sometimes no bigger than a modern garden shed, yet they seeded a manuscript copying tradition that would make future monks the medieval Kindle. You join a line of volunteers passing turf blocks hand to hand. The earth feels cool, springy, and you wonder whether you're building holy ground or the world's trickiest layer cake. A burly carpenter named Skapti pauses to explain that whalebone ribs will arch overhead in place of sawn timber. Quirky tidbit alert. Driftwood shortages forced builders to scavenge bleached whale skeletons, turning sanctuaries into accidental marine museums. He chuckles that if the congregation sings off-key, the walls might echo like a disgruntled orca at a raven. Yes, your push notification pal circles, spies the pile of shiny copper nails, and dives. You sweat gently, shooing it toward the goat catwalk, muttering that Bird Church 1.0 is still in beta. Another volunteer raises an eyebrow. You shrug, explaining the avian likes collecting spoilers. Bellows hiss from a makeshift forge where blacksmiths hammer simple iron crosses. You take a turn at the bellows, each squeeze puffing sparks skyward like confetti fired from a dragon's nostrils. Joke number 2 struts through the smoke. You realize you're basically playing medieval accordion for molten metal, no tips, no encore. Still, rhythm warms your fingers and you fall into a meditative wheeze-clank rhythm, recalling yesterday's pebble bowl. Different tools, same communal heartbeat. During a water break, Skapti tells you rumors of ships recently sighted west of Greenland, captained by one Leaf, Eric the Red's boy, hunting new pastures over endless sea. Mainstream fact number 2 swings by. About the year 1000, Leif Erikson did indeed stumble upon Vinland, likely coastal Newfoundland, snagging the pre-Columbus, I was here first badge. Everyone listening nods, already plotting trade routes in their heads. After all, Thunderbread might travel well if you skip the thunder. A young woman approaches holding a pouch of dried puffin hearts skewered on thin twigs. She claims, in hushed tone, they're unmatched love charms. Bury one under a crush's pillow and enjoy instant swoon. You blink. She insists it's bona fide science. Scholars still argue whether puffin heart amulets saw wide use or merely funded one clever entrepreneur's chick flick side hustle. You purchase a heart anyway, souvenir or emergency romance insurance. And joke number 3 peeks out, whispering that modern dating apps could never compete with swipe right for seabird ventricles. Work halts for lunch. Trench fires roast yesterday's baptized trout. Their now holy state apparently doing nothing to deter appetites. You snag a fillet, noting the subtle salt tang of sanctification. Either that or someone heavy-handed with seasoning. As you chew, you recall the herbal Angelica promise to cure political hangovers and decide your head feels surprisingly light. Maybe placebo is a miracle in itself. Across the field, choirs rehearse a psalm in Fornerislag meter, stressing heavy alliteration. Christer Knyr, care likes kva. Christ compels, love decrees. The skald from the rap battle duet tweaks lines on wax tablets, muttering about syllable counts. You wander closer, offering the puffin heart treat as payment for a front row seat. He declines but jots the quirky ingredient into his growing list of potentially edible metaphors. Suddenly, debate flares near the half-built nave. 2 elders argue over which direction the altar should face. One insists strict east-west alignment, echo of Roman churches. The other claims turning the facade against prevailing wind will save worshippers from snow-whipped sermons. Historians still argue whether early Icelandic churches consistently faced east or pragmatically faced, whichever way keeps hymnals dry. The compromise? They mark an eastish line with a goat tether naturally, and angle the doorway a smidge south, promising divine patience with local meteorology. Afternoon shadows slide across basalt like slow ink. You help lay whalebone rafters, marveling at porous white arches that once buoyed a leviathan. Each rib slots into turf walls with a resonant thunk, earth and sea shaking hands under brand new theology. Your muscles burn pleasantly. The rhythm of labor becomes its own lullaby. During a break, the dolphin-doodling scribe arrives, unveils her latest vellum. A church shaped like a whale skeleton, tiny haloed goats singing inside. She giggles that future readers will assume satire. You assure her historians deserve Easter eggs. She adds a footnote caricature of you wrestling the raven for copper nails. Art imitating life, or life chasing breadcrumbs of comedy. Evenings first chill presses against sweat-damp tunics. Workers light pitch torches along the church frame. Flames cast ribcage shadows that dance like giant harp strings across the turf. Someone taps a bronze bowl, calls for silence. The Lawspeaker steps forward, hair still beaded with baptism water. He raises a single pebble. Yes, the same ritual memory stone turned spiritual punctuation, and lodges it into a gap atop the doorway lintel. First stone of many, he intones, carrying the weight of peace. The crowd hums approval, some tracing crosses, others touching Thor hammers as though double-checking they're still allowed. You stand back, absorbing the scene. Whale bones glowing, aurora blooming faint behind smoke, and that goat, silk wig askew, nibbling turf scraps like a stagehand devouring props after curtain call. The valley smells of moss, hot iron, and hope. A combination your memory labels, new era fresh. Tired but unwilling to surrender daylight, you follow Skapti to the forge to help quench the last cross of the batch. He plunges it into water. Steam erupts, curling around your face. You watch droplets bead on the metal, thinking of your reversible pendant. Cross on one side, hammer on the other, tucked safe inside tunic, now joined by a puffin heart stowaway. Symbols layering like weather-worn graffiti upon the heart. Maybe identity is best kept in pencil anyway. Torches burn lower, and finally work adjourns. Someone strikes up a slow circle dance, hips stiff after hours hefting turf. You shuffle into line, stepping left, right, skipping when the rhythm commands, laughter bubbling each time feet tangle. Joke number 4, bonus overtime again. Murmurs that you've achieved holy cardio. Indulgence plenary and glut toning in one hymn-powered package. As stars puncture the dark, a messenger from the fjords arrives with tidings. King Olaf is pleased, will send timber for a proper bell tower once snows melt. Cheers rise. You note the irony that accepting Christianity might finally score Iceland its missing forests, courtesy of Norwegian diplomacy disguised as lumber. Logistics aside, the thought of a bell pealing over Thingvellir tickles your ears. Ushering bedtime in Dolby surround you slip away to the riverbank. Kneel where yesterday's baptisms rippled. Water reflects church rib torches, stars, and your own weary grin. You drop a stone into the current, imagining it a tiny pebble memory of today's labors, tumbling toward the sea. Steam brushes your cheeks, and the hush returns, soft as a lullaby hummed through whalebone. Cloak wrapped tight, you head for your tent, goat wig now a distant silhouette posing for admiring ravens. Tomorrow may bring debates about bell size, Leaf's Vinland logistics, and Puffin Heart marketing regulations, but tonight your muscles buzz with honest work, your mind nests in images of glowing whalebone cathedrals, and your heart beats steady, half hammer, half cross. Under aurora-lit sky, you exhale, feeling the valley breathe with you, and drift towards sleep as turf walls cradle new faith beneath ancient stars. You wake to the sound of rhythmic clacking, like two coconuts auditioning for a cavalry scene. Blinking away church-building dreams, you peek outside and spot Skapti pacing the lava flats on homemade wooden snowshoes, testing whether his new design can outrun the valley's notorious morning mud. Joke number 1 tips its hat. You'd call the contraptions Skapti Crocs. But marketing hasn't advanced that far. Steam drifts low, smelling faintly of yesterday's sanctified trout. Your stomach rumbles a prayer for breakfast, so you shuffle toward the communal cookfire that now doubles as the Thingvellir Cafe. A woman ladles cracked barley porridge into wooden bowls, topping each serving with a ruby dollop of crowberry jam. Mainstream historical fact saunters up beside the spoon. Crowberries, hardy little spheres, were among the few fruits tough enough to survive Icelandic chill, giving medieval diets a rare hit of vitamin C before anyone could pronounce ascorbic. You spoon a mouthful, tart, earthy, just enough zing to convince your taste buds to clock in. While you eat, the dolphin doodling scribe plops beside you, brandishing fresh vellum. Overnight she drafted a comic strip of the goat wigging the raven with the stolen silk cape. Each panel includes tiny CW speech bubbles. You almost snort porridge. Joke number 2 waves a porridge-splattered flag. Then barter the original art for 2 puffin hearts you never asked Cupid to deliver. Fair trade, medieval style. Across the field, missionaries rehearse bell ringing by banging a bronze cauldron with a driftwood ladle. Less angelic chime. More, someone dropped pots in Valhalla. Skapti hollers suggestions about pitch control. The cleric answers with a blunt reminder that real bells require real timber, and Norway's log shipment is still surfing the North Atlantic. Quirky tidbit tags along. Until proper bells arrived, some Icelandic churches called worship with ramhorn trumpets or, rumor says, by having teenagers yodel scripture from the roof. Your eardrums issue a silent restraining order. Post-breakfast, you join a work crew tasked with gathering obsidian shards from the nearby lava field. The plan is to inlay them around window slits so morning light flickers like a tame aurora during Mass. The walk is brisk. Brittle grass crunches underfoot, ravens hop aside, and the goat, ever the influencer, follows, silk wig now accented by an impromptu copper nail tiara. You can't decide if it's haute couture or barnyard cry for help. You stoop to pry a shiny obsidian flake from the ground. Its edge is razor-sharp, reflecting a warped version of your own face. A reminder that beauty and paper-cut potential often share real estate. Mainstream fact number 2 slips in. Icelanders fashioned obsidian blades for surgical procedures well into the 19th century, preferring them to early steel for their unparalleled sharpness. You pocket 3 pieces, promising your future blisters the gentlest medical attention lava can buy. Mid-collection, distant horn blasts roll across the valley. 2 long, 1 short. Everyone freezes, scanning horizons like worried meerkats. A rider crests the far ridge, cloak snapping, horse frothy with sweat. He reins in beside the Law Rock and announces news hotter than a fresh geyser. Leif Erikson's ship has returned to Greenland laden with wine berries and timber, so tall the mast touched clouds. The valley erupts in chatter. Historians still argue whether Vinland's grapes were genuine vitis or just high-confidence gooseberries, but nobody here minds the horticultural fine print. New worlds mean new markets. Thunderbred export fantasies skyrocket faster than Skapti on his wooden moon boots. Excitement sparks an impromptu meeting. You trail the crowd, clutching obsidian shards like raffle tickets, and settle near the Low Rock's warm flank. Delegates debate dispatching a scouting party to confirm Leif's tales. One fisherman suggests sending goats, the wigged one perhaps, as brand ambassadors. Joke number 3 tosses confetti. Imagine future sagas describing Vinland's discovery led by a fashion-forward ruminant. The Lawspeaker, pebble pouch cinched at his belt like a heartbeat, calls for opinions. Some worry about the voyage cost. Others fear throne room politics if Norway smells opportunity first. You weigh arguments while idly flipping your reversible pendant hammer, cross, hammer, matching each symbol to alternating speakers as though scoring a philosophical ping-pong match. During a lull, you share your obsidian haul with the scribe, proposing stained glass mosaics minus the glass. She sketches designs of black shards circling the church's whalebone ribs, labeling them night feathers of the Holy Raven. She winks. Branding is everything. The idea catches, and soon Skapti pledges to grind smaller chips into glittery grout. The rider from Greenland blinks, impressed by how quickly Icelanders convert breaking news into interior decor mood boards. The meeting ends with a compromise, naturally. A small expedition will sail west after midsummer. Volunteers to include traders, a skald to document wonders, and a law speaker apprentice to ensure contracts aren't scribbled on seaweed. You toy with joining. Wanderlust flutters in your chest like a puffin chick flapping stubby wings at its first cliff dive. But you're also weirdly attached to goat runway shows and obsidian fenestrations. Decisions, decisions. Late afternoon finds you back at the church frame, fitting shards into freshly carved niches. The raven lands on the whalebone rafter above, cocking its head as if judging your craftsmanship. You raise an eyebrow, ask whether it prefers Gothic or minimalist, and it answers with a single dignified squawk. Art critic, confirmed that his sun slants low. A chill sweeps in. Workers break for supper. Bowls of dried fish stew enlivened by a dash of imported pepper. Costly spice reserved for special days like, we didn't lose any toes to frostbite celebrations. You savor a spoonful, throat tingling pleasantly. Someone explains that pepper comes via Russian traders crossing the White Sea. Quirky tidbit's second cameo. Arriving so pricey that households measure it grain by grain, the medieval equivalent of printing money on your dinner. Conversation drifts toward philosophical housekeeping. If God forgives sins, does he also forgive bad carpentry? Skapti claims yes, as long as beams stay upright for Sunday service. Scholars still argue whether early Icelandic parishioners expected miracles like self-fixing leak holes or if they simply carried extra thatch to patch divine oversight. You mentally note to keep spare turf handy, just in case. Night creeps in, drawing purple curtains across the rift. Torches bloom around the church skeleton. Obsidian shards catch the flicker, glinting like captive stars. The sight tugs a soft wow from your lips, echoed by nearby gasps. For a moment the valley holds collective breath, marveling how Earth's fire and sea's bones now shelter new prayers without erasing the old. You wander to your tent, feet crunching frost-whitened grass. The goat trails behind, finally shaking off its tiara to forage moss. Apparently fashion is exhausting. You set the coppernail crown on a rock, a tiny monument to absurdity and adaptability cohabitating like cross and hammer on your pendant. Inside the tent, you nestle under cloaks, puffin hearts tucked in a pouch by your head, romance insurance doubling as midnight snack should desperation strike. The raven settles on the ridgepole, feathers fluffed, sentinel of everything you've witnessed. Pebble votes, whalebone cathedrals, Vinland rumors dancing at the horizon, eyelids droop, steam whispers from distant pools, obsidian windows shine like lullaby lanterns, and the valley hums its geothermal hymn. Tomorrow might bring ship manifests, choir retuning, maybe a yodeling bellringer audition you'll pretend to miss. For now, you surrender to sleep, heartbeat syncing with the quiet clack of the raven's beak as it tucks head beneath wing. A gentle metronome guiding you beyond conscious shores. Sunrise plucks amber strings across the ridge, and the raven's first croak yanks you from a dream in which the goat headlined a Vinland fashion show wearing grape leaf shoulder pads. You roll out of your cocoon, brush sleep from eyes gritty with obsidian dust, and step onto frost that crunches like uncooked barley underfoot. Joke number 1 blinks awake. If coffee existed, this valley would open a franchise next to every hot spring. Until then, volcanic vapors serve cappuccino duties without the foam art. The morning's itinerary is scrawled in charcoal on a stretched sheepskin notice board. Choir rehearsal, stone inlay finishing, trial session for unresolved grazing disputes, and, new edition, ship design symposium, hosted by the Greenland rider whose excitement still fizzes like fermented whey. You snag a chunk of yesterday's crowberry bread, chew thoughtfully, and decide your curiosity is bigger than your to-do list. First stop, choir. The makeshift cauldron bell has been upgraded to a wooden frame holding 2 bronze pans pitched a fifth apart. Clerics tap practice patterns, and you help by timing echoes against the cliff, primitive acoustics test that doubles as cardio because you sprint back and forth adjusting distance. Mainstream historical fact joins the warm-ups. Early Icelandic churches often calibrated sound with cliff faces or turf mounds, letting nature act as amplifier long before anyone coined reverb. A young monk thanks you for your fleet feet, which makes you puff out your cloak like a rooster until a pan-clang misfires and you nearly swallow the compliment whole. Rehearsal breaks for hot whey, and you pivot toward the symposium. Under a whalebone awning, the rider spreads sealskin maps depicting Vinland's rumored shoreline, complete with doodled vines so lush they practically drip berry juice. He proposes building a broad-beamed nar able to haul timber home. Skapti counters with a sleeker design, because speed impresses investors. Quirky tidbit glides in. Some shipwrights grease hulls with whale blubber and alder bark slurry, claiming it confuses ice flows into letting vessels pass, sort of a slicked-back hairdo for boats. You imagine icebergs sliding by, muttering nice styling gel, and joke number 2 fires an invisible finger gun. Debate crescendos until the Lawspeaker wanders over, pebble pouch softly ticking, and asks whether anyone's accounted for extra goat space. Apparently the runway star is a non-negotiable goodwill ambassador. Historians still argue whether Iceland actually sent livestock on exploratory voyages or if saga writers later inflated cargo lists for comedic flair. Either way, the goat bleats approvingly, silk wig replaced by a pragmatic wool bonnet that screams nautical chic. By midday, you return to the church to finish obsidian inlays. The shards slide into damp turf like puzzle pieces forged in dragon fire. While polishing edges with a scrap of seal hide, you glimpse your reflection. Cheeks wind-burned, hair salted by steam, grin wide enough to host a crowberry orchard. A flicker of pride ignites. Yesterday this was an abstract dream. Today it's a glittering whale rib lantern about to cradle its first congregation. Work pauses when a messenger announces the quarter court will reconvene to settle that boundary feud. The one with stone markers east of the crooked birch or west by 3 goat lengths. Remember? You dust hands and join spectators forming a semicircle on natural bleachers of moss-cushioned lava. The plaintiffs present new evidence. A water-stained calfskin showing last spring's flood shifted the crooked birch 2 strides downstream. Mainstream fact number 2 steps in. Icelandic law allowed natural disasters to nullify boundaries, but only after official survey, a process nearly as slow as knitting fog. The judges consult rune-etched measuring rods, eye the relocated tree, and decide on a Solomon compromise, Move the fence to follow the creek's current path and order both farmers to share upkeep of a communal footbridge. Joke number 3: doffs a cap. Mandatory friendship by infrastructure. Nothing says bury the hatchet like co-owning a slightly wobbly bridge nobody wants to repair alone. The farmers mutter but eventually handshake, and you feel tension leak into the soil like melted frost. Court adjourns, and a skald leaps atop a boulder to premiere a fresh verse celebrating the goat's forthcoming voyage. Silk-tressed skipper of starlit seas. The crowd hoots. The goat's bonnet slips sideways in practiced flair. You contribute polite applause and sneak away to refill your water skin at the baptized river. Kneeling, you notice tiny crosses of ice forming delicate lattice along the bank. Geology's doily work never disappoints. Steam wafts across water, and you're struck by the valley's layered soundtrack. Bell pans chiming scales, hammer taps from the shipwright tent, distant laughter where puffin hearts undoubtedly fuel flirtation experiments. You close eyes, allowing the sounds to braid into lull-tempo music. A soft reality check tiptoes in. You probably wouldn't survive an actual winter here without central heating or Instacart apples, but here in Midsummer's Grace you can pretend resilience is as easy as breathing volcanic mist. The afternoon slides by on greased gull wings. You help Skapti test a miniature hull model in a warm shallows pool. It floats straight, even with a pebble-weight goat figurine aboard, proof of concept, at least for tiny oceans. Quirky tidbit resurfaces. Model ships sometimes carried runes scratched beneath the keel to bless the full-size build, though historians still argue whether that counted as divine engineering or just spiritual marketing collateral. You scratch a tiny hammer and cross hybrid under the toy, hedging cosmic bets. Supper materializes in the form of barley cakes stuffed with diced lamb and angelica. While eating, you trade news with a wandering herbalist who swears boiling lichen in fermented milk cures literally everything, from frostbite to broken hearts. She agrees to brew you a batch if you supply obsidian dust for textural intrigue. You promise a pouch tomorrow, making note that love and lichen apparently share the same prescription pad. Twilight descends in lilac waves. Workers light torches along the unfinished ship frame where the rider outlines next steps. Carve steering or assemble pine mast once Norway's lumber gift arrives, and test sail near Reykjavik Bay. Excitement buzzes like gnats above barley fields. You catch yourself picturing distant Vinland forests, vines drooping heavy with mythical grapes, and maybe the raven perched in a birch there, judging new horizons. Wanderlust nudges again, but the obsidian church glows behind you, windows sparking like welcome home beacons. Home or horizon? Another decision for some other dawn. Night closes its velvet drape, punctured by aurora rivets. Choir members gather inside the Bone Rib Sanctuary for the very first candlelit rehearsal. You slip in, sitting on a turf bench still damp and smelling of earth. Voices rise, low, tentative, then blooming, echoing through whale bone, ricocheting off obsidian, weaving a sound you've never heard. Equal parts ocean cavern, volcanic vent, and human hope. Gooseflesh ripples down your arms, and you realize you're witnessing history's first duet between geology and gospel. Candles gutter low, hymn fades, and everyone files out in reverent hush. Outside, the raven lands on your shoulder, surprisingly gentle, as though granting backstage access to the sky's ongoing aurora performance. You chuckle, scratch its neck, and feel tomorrow's questions drift away on wing beats. Ship or shrine, goat or grape, hammer or cross. Maybe the answer is simply yes. Back at your tent, you fold into cloaks, place the reversible pendant atop your puffin heart pouch, and listen as the valley exhales steam, song, and distant carpentry yawns. Under obsidian stars, you find sleep sliding toward you like a friendly tide, carrying dreams of glassy windows, grape-fringed shores, and a goat posing for statues in far-off lands where sagas have yet to be written. Some mornings arrive politely, knocking with a pastel sunrise. Today barges in like a tipsy walrus, bright, loud, and very sure you should be awake. You sit up, blankets ask you, as the raven dive bombs your tent flap clutching a strip of parchment in its beak. Joke number 1 tips its helmet. Medieval push notifications now come with built-in delivery bird. You untie the note to find Skapti's scrawl, "Emergency at the slipway. bring obsidian dust and optimism. Nothing says rise and shine like volcanic glitter and motivational quotes. Outside, mist hovers ankle-high, curling around feet as though the earth itself prefers house slippers. You hurry toward the half-built hull where Skapti paces, beard bristling. Overnight frost warped 2 keel planks, leaving a gap wide enough for a particularly ambitious herring to stage a jailbreak. Mainstream historical fact steps onto the scene. Viking shipwrights soaked warped wood, then heated it with steam from stone hearths, bending fibers back into alignment. A technique equal parts carpentry and sauna therapy. Skapti plans to borrow a nearby geyser for precisely that, because why build a fireplace when the planet's already boiling water for free? You volunteer as steam wrangler. Soon, you and 3 helpers roll the hull beside a sputtering vent, anchoring ropes around whalebone stakes. As vapor billows, boards soften, and Skapti wedges the keel straight with wooden wedges that look suspiciously like oversized cheese slicers. Quirky tidbit glides in. Some shipbuilders stuffed sheep fat between hull planks as makeshift caulking, claiming it repelled sea trolls more effectively than tar. You eye the goat ambassador nibbling moss nearby and decide not to mention the alternative career in plumbing. While the wood steams, a missionary strolls up with an iron bell no bigger than your fist. Apparently an interim chime until Norway's megalog bell tower arrives. He proposes testing resonance inside the obsidian church. Skapti grumbles but nods. Multitasking keeps anxieties from sprouting barnacles. You escort the cleric to the glowing whale rib sanctuary, the raven flapping overhead like a fussy stage manager. Inside, candlelight scatters shards of rainbow off black glass. You stand beneath the nave's highest rib as the bell rings. The tone ricochets around obsidian facets, morphing into a soft hum that settles into your bones like hot whey sliding down a sore throat. Joke number 2 strides by wearing earplugs. If modern noise-canceling headphones sounded this good, nobody would ever unbox them. Even the raven pauses, head tilting, apparently impressed enough to postpone its daily critique. Across the aisle, the dolphin-doodling scribe scribbles acoustics notes, adding tiny musical notes to her goat caricatures. She whispers that the bell's echo reminds her of distant surf, an auditory postcard from Vinland. You grin, wanderlust stirs again, but the keel gap remains on your to-fix list. And anyway, you've got a pocket full of obsidian dust for lichen potions later. Pragmatism wins round 1. Back at the slipway, steam clouds part to reveal a perfectly straightened keel. Skapti whoops, fists raised, and commands a celebratory snack break. Enter Thunderbread Encore, warm from another night of geothermal baking. You spread skier, sprinkle a pinch of pepper, luxury flex, and chomp. Remembering your first Thunder loaf slice feels like a lifetime ago. Nostalgia arrives early when days cram in saga-sized plot twists. Mid-bite, the Lawspeaker approaches, pebble pouch swaying. He invites you to a private council regarding voyage volunteer lists. Evidently your name has surfaced, partly because you handle steam like a wizard, partly because the goat trusts you. Historians still argue whether ship crews truly included a goat whisperer. But the Lawspeaker insists morale matters at sea, and comedic livestock helps. Joke number 3. Duck walks by, bleeding that HR just posted a ruminant relations specialist opening. You follow him to a basalt outcrop shading a wax calfskin map. He outlines roles: navigator, carpenter, scald, trade liaison, goat liaison. That's you, apparently. You hesitate. What about the church windows? He counters that obsidian inlay training has already inspired apprentices. Your shards will keep sparkling without you. A long inhale brings sulfur and piney angelica on the breeze. Exhale carries a flutter of yes between heartbeats. Still, you bargain for time to prepare. He grants 3 weeks, long enough to finish windows, brew lichen tonic for seasickness, and, importantly, teach the raven not to steal navigational runes mid-voyage. Easy, right? You shake hands. The pebble pouch clinks approval, sealing fate in stone. WY afternoon. The keel is cooling, patched with sheep fat caulk that smells faintly like a wool sweater caught in a sauna. Skapti thanks you with a token, a palm-sized wooden disc etched with interlocking hammer and cross motifs. He calls it a faith compass. Point it whichever way courage feels strongest. You pocket it beside your reversible pendant and the 2 surviving puffin hearts, Cupid still on retainer. Work winds down and you detour to the herbalist's lean-to. She accepts your obsidian dust, then simmers lichen, fermenting whey, and crowberry mash into a thick tonic that looks like midnight jam. She swears a teaspoon wards seasickness, heartbreak, and, if applied topically, goat dandruff. You dub it multitasking marmalade and stash a flask in your pack. Evening drapes indigo across cliff walls. Choir practice spills through church doors. Voices steadier now, harmonies confident as if the bell's resonance taught chords their rightful place. You linger outside, listening, letting anticipation buzz but not bite. Tomorrow's tasks loom. Sailcloth cutting, goat bonnet waterproofing, raven obedience classes. But tonight you have only the present. Obsidian windows flicker, wood smoke rises, and a small iron bell hums comfort into the cooling air. You stroll to the riverbank where baptisms tamed water into memory. Shadows ripple across the surface, and you skip a flat pebble. 1, 2, 3 hops, each ring widening until lost in steam. You recall the court's fence compromise and wonder. Boundaries, like ripples, shift yet persist. Perhaps your upcoming voyage is another pebble tossed into a wider world. Rings of story set to spread beyond this valley. The raven lands on your shoulder, gently pecking the wooden faith compass. You laugh, promising it a front-row perch on the mast if it behaves. The goat munches nearby, now sporting a parchment bib reading Vinland or Bust. Courtesy of the scribe's mischievous branding spree. You shake your head. Comedy cargo is clearly secured. Stars prick through twilight, auroras stretch gauzy arms. You walk back to camp, heart light but anchored, mind ticking through mental packing lists, extra cloaks, thunderbread rations, lichen tonic, and, of course, the pebble pouch on temporary loan to mark latitude by counting prayers. Steam whispers lullabies across gravel, and the church bell gives a final soft clang as if saying, "Go, but come home." Crawling into your tent, you nestle between cloaks, sliding the faith compass under your palm like a warm stone. You feel goat hoofbeats thud in the distance, perhaps rehearsal for deck pacing. You hear the raven rustle feathers, settling on the ridgepole with bureaucratic sigh. All sounds blend, bell echo, geyser pulse, soft breath, into a cradle-tight hum. Tomorrow will hammer details. Tonight, you float on a sea of gathered possibilities, knowing Thingvelir's steam will follow you in memory no matter how far west the tide pulls. Morning sunlight filters through thin wool walls, turning your tent into a glowing lantern that politely suggests alarm clock. You emerge to find Skapti already directing a chorus of hammers, his breath puffing rhythmically like a blacksmith dragon. First up on the agenda, shaping the steering or aga, literally the ship's eye. Joke number 1 hustles forward because nothing says safe navigation like giving your boat its own eyeball. Let's hope it doesn't blink at the wrong fjord. You shoulder into the work line, hefting alder planks still scented with sea spray. Mainstream historical fact joins the hustle. Early Norse steering oars were starboard mounted, a tradition so ingrained that steerboard eventually gave modern ships the very word starboard. You angle the plank against a cradle, and Skapti scrapes bark, revealing golden grain that gleams like polished honey at mid-gouge. A stray copper nail clinks off your boot, souvenir from the goat's tiara days. You pocket it, mindful that even fashion fails make decent spare parts. Across the yard, the goat itself practices boarding ramps, bonnet tied tight beneath its chin, parchment bib fluttering Vinland or Bust. Trots up, down, up again, clearly embracing its role as morale officer. Quirky tidbit trots alongside. Sagas mention livestock brought on voyages not just for milk or meat but as moving barometers, their unease foreshadowed storms. Better watch that bonnet twitch for barometric gossip. By mid-morning the raven swoops overhead, delivering a shellfish, part bribe, part breakfast, before parking on the half-carved oar. A novice carpenter shoos it away, worried about droppings. The bird glares, hops to the mast stump, and begins rearranging decorative ribbons into something akin to runway ready. Historians still argue whether ravens intentionally assisted Norse navigators. Legend says they released birds to spot land, or merely freeloaded on deck snacks. Either way, you suspect this raven is unionizing for better ribbon perks. Work pauses for a strategy huddle. The Lawspeaker outlines the supply roster: barrels of dried fish, sacks of barley, flasks of the herbalist's all-purpose lichen tonic, and crowd favorite Thunderbread balls pre-shaped for easy rationing. He slides a pebble across a slate each time an item is confirmed, that familiar chink-chink turning grocery list into ASMR beat. You volunteer to oversee bread logistics, citing extensive taste testing credentials. Joke number 2 wraps on the table. Resume now reads, Certified Carb Curator. Next, a monk proposes carving a cross atop the prow. Skapti counters with a stylized hammer beneath, for balance. Everyone turns to you, the official faith compass. So you suggest intertwining both into a single knotwork emblem. Compromise sails through faster than a tailwind. Artisans fetch chisels. You feel a warm glow that's either satisfaction or the lichen tonic sample you sipped earlier. Tastes like mushroom lemonade but allegedly prevents scurvy and breakups. Lunch arrives as wooden bowls of fermented shark soup. You brave one sip, mouth igniting in ammonia fireworks, and silently thank Thunderbread for existing as palate rescuer. Mainstream fact number 2 pops in, waving a nose plug. Hakarl, that infamous shark, begins as Greenland sleeper shark cured underground for months, making it edible yet aggressively aromatic. Viking answer to wasabi grenade. You manage 3 polite spoonfuls before passing the bowl to someone claiming, strong character builds strong crews. Sure, you'll build character later, after your tongue forgives you. Afternoon brings sail making. Bolts, of course, will unfurl like gray waterfalls across the meadow. Tailors measure twice, cut once, then ask you to paint wind runes along the hem using crowberry dye mixed with obsidian dust. Callback delight. Same glitter you ground for church windows now moonlights as nautical graffiti. You dip a brush, stroke shimmering symbols, G shapes for gusser, breeze, swirls for Anvari, light air. Quirky tidbit resurfaces. Some captains swore rune-painted sails caught wind faster, though skeptics claimed placebo powered by wishful lung capacity. Historians still argue whether any recorded speed gains were meteorological accidents or marketing brilliance. Mid-brushstroke. You crack joke number 3, telling nearby tailors the goat demanded a personalized mini-sail cape. They laugh until realizing you're half serious. Embroidery discussions ensue. Within minutes a palm-sized sail is cut, rune-splashed, and fitted over the goat's bonnet like a superhero cloak. Because if morale is the cargo, branding is the mast. As sun tilts west, Skapti initiates a flotation test. You and half the camp heave the hull onto greased log rollers. Whale blubber again, slippery as politician promises, and inch toward a placid hot spring-fed pond. The raven rides the prow like a feathered figurehead. The goat stands amidships, cape billowing. With a final shove, the Nar glides, nose kissing water, hull settling without complaint. Cheers erupt, echoing off cliff walls. You exhale, shoulders unclenching. Plank gaps hold, keel true, and no herring jailbreak in sight. A quiet moment blooms as ripples smooth. You crouch on the shore, fingertips skimming hot-cold surface layers. Thermal spring meets glacier melt. You think about Thingvelor's earlier crack between thunder and cross, now mended by pebble votes. Your ship, too, is a stitched seam between old and new. Whale bones and iron nails, hammer and cross knot, raven scout and goat barometer. Balance isn't a static line. You realize, it's a dance on rolling waves. Evening's lavender light invites celebration. Workers string fish oil lanterns along the pond. Obsidian flakes inside each glass jar scatter kaleidoscope glimmers across water. Choir members arrive, accompanied by that little iron bell. They sing a blessing over the hull, voices mingling with bubbling hot spring vents. Gooseflesh climbs your arms again, same sensation as first whalebone rehearsal. Skapti passes a horn of spiced Brennivin. You sip cautiously, caraway and smoke swirl, kinder than shark soup. Someone offers smoked puffin heart canapes. You accept, partly to honor Cupid contract, partly to cushion rising buzz. The Lawspeaker raises his bell, signaling hush. He tosses a single pebble into the pond, declaring it the voyage's first ripple. The stone plinks, circles widening until they kiss hull sides. A visual echo of yesterday's boundary-settling ripples. He invites crew candidates. Navigator, carpenter, scald, Goat liaison you. To step aboard for oath-taking. You feel legs lighten, halfway between nerves and thrill. The goat boards first, naturally, trotting to the bow and striking a pose. The raven flaps overhead, dropping a ribbon onto your head as if knighting you with fabric. Laughter ripples. You walk the plank, literally, onto deck still smelling of fresh alder. Hand on the intertwined emblem. You vow to chart seas with courage, honor, and adequate snack breaks. Crew echoes similar oaths, each tailored. Navigator promises not to confuse West with the other West. Scald pledges to document heroics without excessive embellishment. Wink. Skapti vows to patch leaks before they become free indoor pools. The bell rings. Cheers answer. Dusk settles. Lantern reflections paint double constellations, one above, one afloat. You disembark, muscles humming with anticipation. Tomorrow brings provisioning drills, sail hoist practice, maybe Raven Obedience 101. But for this hour, suspense eases. The Nar sways gently, water lapping like a slow heartbeat, echoing Thingvelir's own geothermal sigh. You retreat toward camp, faith compass ticking warm in your pocket. The herbalist waves you over, handing a flask labeled Anti-Dragon Nausea. You arch a brow. She winks, explaining sailors blame sea dragons for queasy stomachs. Joke number 4, yes, overtime again. Quips that if dragons munch on thunderbread rations, you'll file a celestial complaint. Laughter floats into cooling air. Tucked in your tent, you set the wooden compass, reversible pendant, and raven ribbon beside your pillow like sleepy talismans. Outside, choir embers dim, but the bell hum lingers, mingling with distant geyser pulses and the goat's satisfied bleat. You breathe deep. Sulfur, smoke, and possibility. Ice close. The pond's gentle slap against hull merges with heartbeat, carrying you into dreams where stars steer ships and ravens ink constellations onto night sails, guiding you west while steam of Thingvellir curls far behind like a memory-made wake. Morning crackles with energy, as if the valley has brewed an espresso from geyser steam and served it directly to everyone's bloodstream. You spring from your blankets just as the iron bell gives 3 bright dings. Skapti's new signal for all hands. Less yawns. Joke number 1 yawns on cue, then snaps to attention. Apparently even humor has roll call out by the pond. Mist clings to the freshly floated Nar. Today is provisioning day, and the Lawspeaker has transformed the shore into an open-air warehouse stocked with barrels, sacks, and enough fish to convince the local otters you're opening an all-you-can-eat buffet. He rattles his pebble pouch like a cashier's coin purse, counting every item that crosses the gangplank. Mainstream historical fact strolls over with a clipboard. Norse expeditions typically packed 4 to 6 months of supplies, anticipating calms, storms, and the occasional oops, we discovered a continent detour. You eye the growing mountain of thunderbread balls. Apparently carbs will not be the weak link. Your assignment is small but crucial. Stow the herbalist's remedies and lichen tonic safely below decks. She hands you leather flasks painted with little sea dragon doodles. Part label, part deterrent against thirsty crewmates. Quirky Tidbit perches on her shoulder and whispers that sailors sometimes named their medicines after mythical beasts to scare away the very ailments they treated. You tuck the flasks in a straw-lined crate beside spare goat bonnets, weatherproof, silk-trimmed, and a pouch of raven treats. Dried herring spritzed with a drop of Brennivin, because apparently your feathered colleague prefers his fish flambé. Speaking of the raven, it lands on the mast stump clutching a ribbon that reads Senior Navigation Consultant. You roll your eyes but indulge the bird, tying the sash in a jaunty bow. Raven training commences. You stand at the bow, release it toward a distant basalt spire, and whistle the 2-note command you practiced last night. The bird pulls a quick U-turn, dives at the goat's rune-splashed minisail, and steals a stray bit of moss. Not exactly textbook, but at least it came back. Historians still argue whether actual Viking crews could reliably use ravens to locate land or if the birds mostly provided in-flight entertainment. You suspect reality lies somewhere between scientific navigation and feathered stand-up comedy. Mid-morning sun climbs, as does the tempo. Skapti lines the crew for a dry sail drill. Hoisting the Great Gray will sheet on land to practice knotwork before wind becomes a critic. You grip a hemp line, pulling in time with the carpenter's chant. Under, Over, loop, and stow. The sail unfurls. Runes you painted yesterday catching light so each obsidian fleck glitters like onboard stars. Joke number 2 flutters past. Who needs celestial navigation when you've stapled a mini constellation to your own fabric? The goat ambles underneath the raised canvas, finding sudden shade and bleeding approval that echoes like applause. A deckhand wonders aloud whether that counts as positive sea trial feedback. You promised to log it in the official goat liaison notebook. Yes, Skapti issued you one, embossed with tiny hoofprints. When the sail practice ends, you break for a briefing on weather signs. The navigator unrolls a chart of cloud sketches, mare's tails, mackerel skies, and a doodled thunder face that looks suspiciously like the Lawspeaker after a night of fermented shark. He explains that high cirrus means fair wind, while a sudden halo around the moon warns of a storm. Mainstream fact number 2 breezes by. Norse sailors read sky halos as ice crystal omens of approaching low-pressure systems, centuries before barometers made predictions less poetic. Just as you finish noting that down, the raven shrieks 3 times its agreed incoming front signal. Everyone scans the horizon. Sure enough, a bank of fog rolls up the rift like a silent avalanche. Skapti claps. Perfect time, he says, for blind steering drills. Your stomach flips, not from fear, but from last night's residual shark soup daring to re-enter dialogue. You down a spoon of lichen tonic, grimace at its pickled mushroom tang, and feel queasiness retreat. Maybe the herbalist's marketing wasn't all puffin hearts and wishful brewing. Fog wraps the pond, turning familiar shapes ghostly. Skapti assigns stations, 2 at the oar, 1 at the sheet, you at the bow with the raven, ready to relay audible signals. You call out distances to unseen shore while the carpenter taps the hull, each knock guiding the crew like somnolent drumbeats. Joke number 3 sneaks in with a whisper that this is either cutting-edge seamanship or a very elaborate trust fall. Moments later, the prow bumps the landing logs with a gentle thunk. Drill success. Fog thins, applause rises, and someone breaks out a flask of celebratory whey branvin. You decline, 1 tonic at a time, but toast with thunder bread, sharing smaller crumbs with the raven in hopes of programming positive reinforcement. The afternoon is devoted to weapon inspection, because even exploratory Nars prepare for less enthusiastic welcomes. Short-haft axes, Sikh's knives, and a single spear tipped with polished obsidian are laid out on seal hides. Skapti insists blades remain peace-bonded unless desperate. He gestures to the goat, proclaiming that if negotiations sour, they'll unleash the fearsome silk-sailed beast. Laughter ripples through the ranks, diffusing tension sharper than any blade nearby. The scribe sketches the scene, captioning it Article 1, Diplomacy by Bleat. She adds an asterisk referencing the earlier quarter-court compromise, remember that wobbly bridge, creating a visual echo linking land law to sea protocol. You marvel at how quickly stories weave themselves into living memory, then onto vellum, then back into new stories. Balance, again, is a dance. This time in ink, late light paints long amber bars across the valley. Choir practice drifts from the whalebone church, rehearsing a farewell hymn adapted from an older sea charm. Its refrain promises safe return, unless the world itself splits wider than Thingvellir. An eerie line, but delivered in such soft harmony it feels like a blanket rather than a warning. You close your eyes, savor chords reverberating in chest cavity, and think of the bright ribbon road westward where sunrise and sunset mingle. Camp supper. Roasted lamb dotted with crowberries and angelica, plus a side of crisp kelp wafers newly arrived from coastal traders. Quirky tidbit slides onto the plate. Kelp crunch was considered a delicacy and, according to some, a hair-growth tonic, handy for those sporting windswept Viking mullets. Scholars debate whether the practice had any nutritional merit or simply satisfied the desire to chew something crunchy after months of soggy sea rations. You munch a wafer. The texture is beach meets biscotti, and you silently hope for luscious locks by voyage's end. Stars creep out. Aurora's sketch faint scribbles. The Lawspeaker gathers crew and well-wishers for a quiet circle beside the still Nar. He places 8 pebbles, 1 for each officer, into your faith compass lid, then shuts it tight, a portable parliament to guide decisions at sea. He reminds everyone of the church bell's echo, promising that each chime you recall will tether you home across waves. Emotion prickles the corners of your eyes. You blame wood smoke, but no better. You retire to your tent. Raven perched at the entrance like a doorman charging fish for entry. Inside, you unwrap spare rune paint and touch up the goat's mini-sail, adding a small grape cluster Vinland teaser. The goat peeks in, snorts approval, and leaves you with that grassy barn smell that feels oddly comforting now. Cloaks wrapped, you set the pebble-filled compass near your head, alongside pendant, ribbon, and the lone surviving puffin heart. Lucky charm or midnight snack, undecided as sleep edges closer. You hear the pond lap softly against hull timbers, almost whispering rehearsal lines for tomorrow's launch ceremony. Fog residue lingers, dampening sound into a cotton hush. You let the quiet seep inside, smoothing thought edges, until only slow breath and distant bell memory remain. Steam curls invisible through night, tracing shapes you might follow soon, west of maps, further than the valley's rift. But for now, it lulls you deeper, dream-bound, toward a gentle, uncharted sea. Dawn silvers the pond like a freshly polished shield, and the chilly air carries a hush so profound you almost expect the earth to whisper, "Good luck." You're up before the raven's first croak. Miracle or nerves, who can tell? Lacing boots while steam from your breath curls inside the tent, painting ghostly runes that fade before decipherable. Outside, Skapti already limbers shoulders with stretches that resemble wrestling invisible trolls. Joke number 1 claps politely, impressed by his commitment to cardiovascular carpentry. Today is Launch Day Eve, the official blessing and naming ceremony before tomorrow's departure. You tread toward the Nar, heart thumping like the iron bell now hanging from a temporary wooden tripod. Overnight frost beads on the wolf fat caulking, glittering under sunrise as if the hull decided to accessorize. One last checklist waits, and you're first aboard, running fingertips along railings, feeling every knot you tied yesterday. The goat clops up the gangplank wearing its silk wig bonnet and a miniature grape cluster brooch you attached to the sail cape. It gives an approving grunt that sounds suspiciously like, "Don't forget my close-up." The raven circles overhead, shrieking a 2-note melody you've come to translate as breakfast or mutiny. You fling a dried herring which it snatches midair, then perches on the mast, ribbon fluttering like command stripes. Crew gathers in semicircle. Navigator Fridas squinting at the sky as if reading invisible weather scrolls. Skald Björn warming vocal cords with half-rhymed tongue twisters. The monk carrying a flask of holy water whose cork squeaks with each nervous squeeze. The Lawspeaker approaches, pebble pouch in hand, followed by choir singers and villagers brandishing fresh thunderbread loaves. You smell caramel crust, skyr tang, and wood smoke, Thingvelir's trademark cologne. The ceremony opens with a hymn set to Fornarslag rhythm, choir swaying gently so whalebone rafters of the nearby church echo every stanza. Mainstream historical fact steps into the spotlight. Naming rituals were critical for Norse ships, believed to grant vessels a spirit, skipand, that watched over crew. Wine, ale, or blood might christen the prow, though Icelandic practicality often downgraded to goat milk or, in lean years, plain water. You silently thank the valley's abundance of goats. Fridas pours a ladle of whey across the intertwined hammer and cross emblem, then hands you the ladle. Your turn. You tilt it, letting whey rivulets trace the carved knot, faint steam rising where liquid meets chilled wood. "We name you Vinsel, Wind Soul," Fridas proclaims. The pond mirrors the moment, ripples fanning as if applauding. The goat bleats. Joke number 2 curtsies, apparently marketing focus groups approve of the name. Next, Skapti produces a small leather pouch. Inside are slivers of obsidian you saved from window work. One by one, each crew member presses a shard into a seam along the gunnel, tiny black scales sparkling in a dragonskin mosaic. Quirky tidbit gleams. Some captains embedded gemstones or colored glass into hulls as protective eye spots, believing sea monsters mistook them for larger predators. Historians still argue whether these embellishments actually reduced surprise kraken attacks or simply kept superstitious sailors calm enough to keep rowing. Either way, your shard slots snug beside the goat liaison notebook, primal insurance policy filed. The monk steps forward, flicking holy water over deck boards. A gust carries droplets sideways into Skapti's beard, creating what looks like glitter frost. A few old pagans at the edge mutter playful complaints that Thor might feel left out. So Skapti theatrically lifts his hammer pendant and sprinkles a splash of geothermal spring water for elemental balance. You grin, 2 hydration options, 1 blessed, 1 bubbling. Balanced hydration for the soul, joke number 3 high-fives itself. Choir hushes. Lawspeaker produces your pebble-filled compass lid. He opens it, revealing 8 stones darkened with charcoal runes. One by one, crew touches a pebble, pledging duty. When your turn comes, you lift the pebble etched with a stylized goat, courtesy of the scribe's late-night doodling spree, and vow to keep morale high, cargo safe, and ribbon thefts minimal. Pebble returns to its seat, lid snaps closed, and a sense of gravity settles across shoulders. Peppered with hoplite butterflies, but gravity nonetheless. Suddenly a horn blast slices the hush. Courier from the coast arrives, pony flecked with foam. He dismounts, unfurls a salt-stained scroll. King Olaf's promised timber shipment has been delayed by storms. The Grand Bell Tower's lumber will not arrive for weeks. Immediate reaction? Relieved laughter. No extra logs to hump across lava fields before departure. Beyond the chuckles, mainstream fact number 2 tiptoes in shipping delays plagued medieval trade networks, yet news still traveled faster by horse than modern email buried in spam. The courier also carries a gift, a slender roll of birch bark etched with final navigation tips, stars notated with runic mnemonics, plus a warning about false shores created by low clouds on still water. Frydis absorbs the data like a sponge, ticks notes on her wax tablet, then tucks the birch scroll into a waterproof sealskin sleeve. You can almost see the mental map expanding behind her eyes. Lunch break unfolds picnic style on the grass. Kelp chips, barley cakes, and experimental grape jam whipped up by the herbalist using imported currants dyed purple. It's a placeholder flavor until Vinland vines deliver the real deal. You spread it on thunder bread. The taste is tart-sweet, faintly smoky. Joke number 4, bonus, claims the jam's real miracle is how purple stains conveniently camouflage raven footprints on sailcloth. During the lull, the scribe presents a farewell gift, a miniature vellum codex titled Field Notes and Goat Quotes. Inside are blank pages awaiting journey entries, plus pre-drawn cartoons of the goat doing heroic feats, slays sea dragon with fierce bleat, and the raven directing constellations with conductor's baton. You slip the codex into your satchel beside lichen tonic, feeling gratitude and mild stage fright. Future historians might laugh or applaud depending on your penmanship under gale conditions. Afternoon work resumes. Loading final supplies. You supervise barrel placement so weight distributes evenly, a dance of math and muscle. Quirky tidbit whispers through memory. Norse sailors sometimes packed ballast stones from home shores to ease homesickness, tossing them overboard when extra cargo replaced weight. You slip 2 small Thingvellir pebbles into a pouch. Portable nostalgia should seas get too vast. Historians still argue whether emotional ballast genuinely steadied morale or just cluttered pockets. You vote for both. Skapti orders a last inspection. You crawl into the hold, lantern in hand, verifying lashings. Fish barrels tight, thunderbread sack snug, lichen tonic crate wedged between spare or handles. Goat stalls. Yes, plural, 1 for sleep, 1 for business. Are bedded with dry moss. You secure the raven perch near a skylight so it can commute between navigation gigs without dropping souvenirs on sleeping crew. Dream management at sea requires zoning laws. Evidently. Back on deck, sunset flames the sky vermilion. The iron bell rings a single note that hangs like molten copper in the air. Villagers line the shore, many kneeling to bless the voyage. Others wave cloth scraps dyed with crowberry, creating a fluttering reef of purple goodbyes. You feel tears threaten again, but the raven squawks, snapping the moment before sentiment breaks levees. Comic timing on retainer. Nightfall crowns the ceremony with aurora outdoing itself. Sheets of emerald, ribbons of rose, all mirrored in the still pond where Vinsel rests like a silent dream. Choir hums a drone low enough to vibrate stern planks. Goat dozes, head on railing, cape billowing gently. The raven preens, satisfied with lighting design. You stand middeck, hands on faith compass, letting the sky write luminous runes across your retinas. Eventually torches dim, crowds drift toward tents, and crew disperses for final land sleep. You linger, reluctant to break the spell, but cold nips toes. Before leaving, you slide palm along the prow, whispering a promise to bring her home with stories enough to refill every pebble pocket. Wind answers with a quiet rustle through sailcloth, affirmation or digestive sigh, unimportant. Inside your tent one last time, you tuck compass and codex under pillow. Cloaks wrap you, familiar steam smell easing nerves. Tomorrow you'll trade lava soil for salt brine, geyser hiss for gull cries. Yet Thingvelir's pulse will drum inside chest cavities like a portable hot spring. You drift toward sleep carried by bell echo memory and aurora after images, until all thought dissolves into quiet sea spray rolling across the dream horizon. Dawn arrives bold and brassy, as if the sky itself decided to bang pots and pans to ensure no one oversleeps the great departure. You sit up, heart already paddling faster than any oar, and taste the metallic zing of anticipation on your tongue. Outside, the raven shrieks its 5-note reveille. Apparently it's upgraded from 2 notes for special occasions, and the goat answers with a dignified bleat that translates roughly to, "Let's launch this thing." Joke number 1 bows in. Who needs roosters when you've got a cross-species duet and 0 snooze button? You step into crisp air crackling with frost and excitement. Steam radiates off the pond where Vinsel rests, prow pointing west like a compass needle impatient with hesitation. Crew members bustle about, checking lashings, reknotting ropes already perfectly secure. Anything to keep hands busy while minds wrestle butterflies. Skapti is everywhere at once, beard glittering from yesterday's holy water confetti, eyes shining brighter than polished obsidian. He claps your shoulder, shouting over the morning clamor. If the keel creaks, it's only her spine stretching, comforting, sort of. First task, transfer the gnar from Hot Spring Pond to the glacial river that snakes toward the sea. Timber rollers, whalebone levers, and hefty arms line up along the hull. Mainstream historical fact braces the rollers. Norse ship launches often used greased log tracks, the same principle later echoed by modern slipways. Proof that sometimes the best tech is just slippery wood and loud encouragement. You and half a dozen villagers push. Vinsel shudders, then glides forward with surprising grace. The iron bell rings once, spontaneously, as if approving momentum. Halfway down the track, the goat trots aboard to claim its spot by the foredeck hay net. Someone gasps, worried the extra weight will skew balance. But the animal plants its hooves like a living figurehead and the hull keeps sliding true. Quirky Tidbit leaps aboard. Sagas describe goats as lucky because they chew through onboard pests. Rope-gnawing rats beware. You grin, realizing your morale officer doubles as pest control, a 2-for-1 HR dream. The shift from pond to current hits like a heartbeat. Cold river water laps against oak planks, and Vinsel bobbles before settling, prow slicing downstream. A ragged cheer erupts. You exhale, muscles trembling in that delicious after-strain quiver. Frydis raises her star-etched birch scroll, calling bearings. You unfurl the mainsail with the crew, runes glittering in early sun so fiercely the raven squints. Yes, birds can squint, and relocates to the stern to avoid temporary blindness. Joke number 2 flutters by. Next voyage, maybe supply sunglasses for the avian staff. The first breeze catches fabric, a soft hump that feels like the ship inhaling. Lines strain, mast bows, and suddenly you're moving faster than the current. Banks sliding past in a blur of mossy basalt and lingering wildflowers. From the shore, villagers wave purple crowberry flags. Choir voices drift but fade quickly against the rush of wind and water. Steam vents his farewell. Thingvelir's own applause. Below deck, barrels clunk reassuringly while you check the lichen tonic crate, intact, and tuck the faith compass into a niche near the tiller. A pebble rattles inside the lid, almost a tiny applause. You climb back topside, just in time for Skald Bjorn to belt the voyage ballad's opening stanza. Wind's soul wanders westward, goat and raven at her prow. His voice carries over rippling water like a silk ribbon. The river widens, bends, and you spot the basalt spire used in the raven training drill. Frydis gives you the nod. You release the bird. It arcs skyward, then circles back to drop a ribbon on your head. Old habits before banking toward open sky. Good enough. Historians still argue whether ravens truly homed on landmasses or simply liked stretching wings, but right now its silhouette against the brightening dome feels like a compass rose come alive as the valley walls spread. Your mind flicks through checklists. Goat feed rations? Secure? Thunderbread inventory? Ample? Spare sails? Rolled aft? Anti-dragon nausea tonic? Within panicked reach. You recall the scholarly debate about ballast stones and pat your pocket where two Thingvellir pebbles cling like comfort charms. The weight is featherlight yet anchoring. Mid-morning glare flashes on distant snowfields. Gusts stiffen. The river churns, shoving the hull sideways until Skapti yells for counter or action. You and another deckhand plunge steering oars, muscles burning as you lever the ship back on course. Joke number 3 grunts hello. Nothing like surprise isometric workouts to remind you breakfast was mostly nerves and half a thunderbread ball. Spray freckles your face, shock cold and invigorating. Frydis checks cloud signals. High cirrus mackerel scales, favorable. She sketches quick runes on her wax tablet, sealing predictions with a thumbprint. Mainstream fact number 2 climbs aboard. Norse navigators gauged latitude by summer sun's midnight height, but coastal rivers demanded local lore. Eddies, rock markers, the subtle song of wind kissing certain cliff angles. Frydis hums those notes now, adjusting tiller rhythmically. A shout rises aft. Skald Bjorn spotted a seal following the wake. Seal luck folklore says such escorts mean smooth crossings ahead. The goat bleats approval. The raven, returning, dive bombs the water for a quick fish snack, perhaps sealing the omen. You add the encounter to the goat quotes codex, sketching a stick figure seal high-fiving a bleeding goat. Documentation is KEY.BY noon. The river mouth yawns before you, blending into the steel blue North Atlantic. Swells lift Vinsel in slow pulses. Nothing dramatic yet, but enough to test stomach resilience. You sip a spoonful of dragon tonic. Taste buds whimper, equilibrium applauds. Crew follows suit, faces puckering in synchronized grimace. Quirky tidbit chimes. Sailors claimed bitter tonics, angry up the stomach, bullying nausea into submission. Efficacy aside, shared suffering builds camaraderie. Out on the horizon, faint gull specks will over unseen cliffs. Frydis adjusts course west by southwest, chasing a wind lane darkening the sea's surface like a stroked cat's fur. Mast creaks, ropes sing, and Vinsel surges. Behind you, Thingvellir's steaming silhouettes shrink, rift walls melting into morning haze until only memory holds their shape. A pang tugs your chest. Joy, sorrow, both. Balance again, that endless dance. The Lawspeaker emerges, pebble pouch slung at hip even now. He stands at middeck, recites a brief prayer equal parts psalm and saga, thanking Christ for steady wind and Thor for lively thunderbred yeast. Crew responds with solemn nods, then Skapti cracks, amen and a hammer, sparking laughter that shakes tension loose. The goat sneezes, which everyone takes as applause, while the raven caws a note suspiciously resembling the choir's closing chord. Afternoon sunlight glitters off obsidian inlays along the gunwale. Tiny stars guiding you even under blazing day. You rest palm on one shard, its cold edge a reminder of home's volcanic heart still beating far astern. The journey has truly begun. Maps fade to blank parchment from here, awaiting ink and maybe goat hoofprints as first ocean swells lift you higher. You inhale briny air mixed with resinous pitch and faint whiff of goat hay. It smells like fear and freedom brewed together. You exhale, steadier now, and feel the ship answer. Timbers humming underfoot, water gurgling past, wind threading through rune-painted sail. Vinsel is alive, and you're part of her story line by plank. Daylight leans west, but the sea ahead stretches infinite, shimmering like molten silver hammered thin. You tighten cloak, tuck pebble compass safely, and take your place beside Frydis at the rail. Somewhere out there, Vinland waits with its disputed grapes, uncharted coves, and untold jokes. You aim your thoughts forward, yet carry Thingvellir's warm steam in your chest like a portable hearth. We've left the map, Frydis murmurs. You nod, feeling excitement gust through veins. Good, you whisper back. That's where the best pages start. Salty wind nips your cheeks the way mischievous snowflakes used to back at Thingvellir. Only this time the chill tastes of kelp and possibility. Vinsel rises and falls in a slow, deliberate rhythm, like a giant breathing beneath your feet, and you adjust without thinking, knees bending so the deck feels almost steady. It's the first full day in open water, a day the maps left intentionally blank, and every creak of timber sounds like ink writing itself directly onto your memories. The sky has scrubbed itself spotless, revealing a blazing turquoise dome where gulls will far overhead. Frydis stands at midship clutching her prized sunstone, an oblong crystal she claims can locate the hidden sun through overcast. Mainstream historical fact wades in beside her. Sagas mention Solarstein, a light-splitting gem that let navigators judge solar position even when clouds sulked. Modern experiments with Iceland spar show the method actually works, which feels like medieval GPS minus the subscription fee. She tilts the crystal, watches twin beams slide across her palm, then calls a minor adjustment 2 points north. You relay the course change by tugging the steering or arms burning pleasantly. Just aft, the goat balances like a seasoned sailor, cape flapping, while the raven clutches its ribboned perch muttering unintelligible critiques. Skald Bjorn claims the bird is rehearsing a sea shanty in protocol. Joke number 1 quicksteps across the deck, bowing to its multilingual audience, by mid-morning the breeze strengthens, carrying the scent of distant ice. Cloud wisps creep in, first thin as parchment edges, then thick as wool cloaks. Frydis tests the sunstone again, frowning when light scatters in erratic flashes. Either the sun's taking a coffee break, she mutters, or a squall is brewing. You feel Vinsel respond, timbers humming a deeper register. Skapti orders reefing the sail, and you scamper with crew, loosening lines so rune-flecked fabric curls tighter against the yard as preparations finish. The first spray slaps your face. Icy, invigorating, borderline insulting. Joke number 2 quips that the North Atlantic clearly skipped pleasantries and went straight to waterboarding introductions. You taste salt on your lips and remember the herbalist's dragon tonic. Better safe than storytelling your lunch into the waves. One pungent gulp later, your stomach settles behind a fortress of lichen and whey. Rain begins as a mist, then escalates into pellet-sharp drops drumming the deck like 1,000 tiny smiths forging nails. Visibility shrinks until the sea, sky, and sail blur into monochrome watercolor. Quirky tidbit sloshes up. Some Viking crews believed whistling courted storms. Wind spirits, apparently, loved a catchy tune. So sailors buttoned lips during foul weather. You catch yourself humming the farewell hymn, clamp your mouth shut, and glance around guiltily. Luckily, rain masks your near miss. Lightning flickers low on the southern horizon, followed by a thunder rumble you feel more than hear. The goat's ears twitch. The raven ruffles feathers but remains stoic, maybe assuming Thor's just testing the subwoofer settings on the clouds. Frydis plants herself near the prow, steady as obsidian, watching wave patterns rather than sky. She murmurs about dragon's teeth, whitecaps whose spacing predicts storm length. Historians still argue whether such folk calculations beat random chance or if practiced eyes simply read the water the way shepherds read sheep bells. You decide faith in her gaze is as useful as any barometer. Skapti bellows orders for bucket brigade. You grab one, joining the rhythm, heave, toss, breathe, repeat. Rain mingles with spray until hair plasters to scalp. Cloak absorbs half an ocean, and boots slosh like portable ponds. Joke number 3 staggers by complaining that you've invented wearable aquariums. Fish not included. Despite wet misery, camaraderie sparkles. Each dumped bucket earns a cheer, transforming toil into soggy celebration. Amid chaos, the raven launches into the gale, vanishing inside cloud guts. Panic flares. Your feathered consultant has flown without submitting vacation paperwork. But before alarm settles, it reappears, dropping a wriggling fish squarely into the goat's feed trough. Gift delivered, it lands on the tiller, dripping seawater and self-satisfaction. Skald Bjorn declares this an omen. Sea provides, crew survives. You jot the incident in the Goat Quotes Codex, sketching fish with heroic cape to memorialize generosity of dramatically timed seafood. Hours grind by until rain thins, thunder rumbles away like grumbling stagehands, and clouds peel open to reveal slanted afternoon sun. The sea calms, waves smoothing into wide, glassy swells that reflect bruised violet sky. Vincel exhales a wooden sigh. So do you, shoulder muscles untangling. Skapti inspects rigging, pronounces the ship tighter than a miser's purse, then assigns everyone to drying duty, a process involving sun, spare sailcloth, and vigorous cloak flapping that doubles as impromptu line dance. During the lull, Frydis brings out a small shadow board, basically a wooden disc with a central pin. She places it on still water in a bucket, measures noon shadow length, and pronounces your latitude satisfactory for the Greenland to Vinland corridor. Mainstream fact number 2 strides across deck. Shadowboards, or salskuggi, let Norse seafarers approximate position by comparing midday shadow length to a memorized home benchmark. Portable sundial in a soup bowl, elegant as it is low-tech. Feeling bold, you ask about longitude. She laughs. Nobody has solved that riddle yet, but dead reckoning plus a cooperative raven will get you close enough to smell new wood when coastlines appear. You pretend the lichen tonic also doubles as olfactory enhancer. She smirks, not entirely ruling it out. Sun begins its slow dive, painting bronze streaks across gentle swells. Crew unfurls the full sail again. Rune glitter catches last light, showering deck with sparkles that impress even the goat. You slice thunderbread balls for evening rations, smearing great placeholder jam and handing portions down the line. The combination tastes like nostalgia baked into ambition. Thingvelir's sweetness meeting unknown tartness halfway as bell-instigated dusk rounds the horizon. Skald Bjorn gathers everyone for Saga hour, decreeing it vital for morale and drying socks. He recites an excerpt about Kvasir, poet of gods, who traveled teaching riddles until dwarves fermented his blood into mead of inspiration. The punchline? Bjorn winks and claims your lichen tonic probably shares that recipe, just minus the dwarf. Laughter rings, warmth rises, socks forget their damp, and the raven contributes offbeat percussion with occasional beak taps on the rail. Night settles. Stars burst through in violent clarity. Frydis points out Kochab and Furkad, the guardians of the Little Bear, used by Norse navigators as fallback north markers when Polaris hid. She traces imaginary lines across constellations, projecting tomorrow's heading like dotted paths on cosmic parchment. You watch, enthralled, until a shooting star stitches the sky. 3 crew gasp, goat sneezes. Raven caws a note suspiciously like applause. You whisper a wish, steady wind, gentle waves, comedic timing intact. Below deck later, you hang cloak near a sputtering oil lamp. Water glistens on planks, but bilge level sits well below danger line. Skapti's keel repair passes trial by storm. You stroke the faith compass lid, hearing pebbles shift softly, as if applauding too. From your hammock, you glimpse the goat settling into straw, belly rising in contented rhythm, silk bonnet drying beside it like a folded flag. The raven roosts above doorway, single eye half open, security detail paid in fish. Sleep steals over muscles still buzzing with wave memory. Outside, Vincel murmurs against the sea. Hull seems creaking lullaby notes. You slide deeper, heart synchronized to timber pulse, carrying with you the day's storm-soaked images. Sunstone flashes, rain-tattooed decks, whalebone ribs flexing yet unbroken. Somewhere behind eyelids, Thingvelir's steam mingles with brine, forging a new scent, home revised by ocean. Balanced again, dancing still, you drift into dreams where maps unroll just ahead of prow beams, obligingly blank and eager for ink. The morning air carries a brisk sparkle, as if the sea itself has inhaled ice chips and is exhaling them across the deck in greeting. You swing down from the hammock, boots meeting planks that creak a friendly good morning under your weight. The storm memories of yesterday still hum in calf muscles, but Vincel rocks with such gentle confidence you almost doubt the night's fury really happened. First sight on deck is the goat. Cape dry, silk wig refluffed, standing at the bow like it spent the whole dark shift on lookout duty. Not to be outdone, the raven swoops low, deposits a single pebble on the rail, the avian equivalent of clocking in, then flutters to its ribboned perch with a self-satisfied croak. Joke number 1 doffs a sea-salted hat. You're running the only known vessel where morale officers arrive before their captain's first stretch. Freydis greets you with a curt nod, sunstone already in hand. She raises the crystal, rotating it until two pale beams converge on her thumb, an optical handshake between stone and hidden sun. Mainstream historical fact strolls up the gangway. Sagas credit Solarstein crystals with helping Norse navigators locate the sun through cloud or fog, and modern tests with Iceland spar prove the trick works about as reliably as your phone's compass. Minus battery angst and dubious pop-up ads. Satisfied with the reading, Freydis orders a half-point northward. You relay the command to the steering crew with a tug on the great alder or, with humming like a cello under strain. The early sky stays hospitably clear, a limitless turquoise dome tinged peach at the edges, while the sea spreads flat and mirror-bright. Every rope's squeak sounds amplified in the hush. Every gull cry rings cathedral pure. The crew falls into that easy cadence born of routine. Adjust sheet, check lashings, sip terrifying lichen tonic for preventive pep. You knock back your allotted spoonful, fungal lemonade meets sock water, and chase it with a bite of thunderbread ball. Flavor combination, questionable. Effectiveness, immediate. Mid-morning, a silver splash breaks the glassy surface. A plump seal pops up, blinking liquid moon eyes before disappearing in a swirl. Sailors freeze, then cheer. A seal escort is textbook good omen, and Skald Bjorn belts an improvised verse about blubber-clad angels guiding souls of wind and wood. The goat bleats approval on beat 2. The raven trills a three-note harmony that could either be musical agreement or a request for fish royalties. Quirky tidbit paddles by. Some Norse mariners swore seals were shape-shifting land spirits checking on travelers, and they toss a crust of bread to thank them. You flick a crumb toward the wake. It vanishes, either accepted by grateful spirit or snatched by an opportunistic herring. Historians still argue whether such offerings were widespread piety or a convenient excuse to lighten stale provisions. Either way, the ritual feels right, and the next small swell lifts the bow a little higher. Almost jaunty, hours pass in sun-dappled serenity. You lean on the rail, watching light ripple across rune-painted sail. Obsidian flecks sparkle like captured stars. A soft squeak makes you turn. Skapti's oiling the mast collar, singing the same low-tempo work song he used back in the geothermal yard. His lyrics have evolved. Now they list open-sea chores, reef the hope, grease the dream, mind the goat, and joke number 2 somersaults over the melody. There's nothing like a maintenance madrigal to keep melancholy off the manifest. Around midday, clouds mull on the horizon but stay politely distant. Freydis invites you to try the shadow board, a small wooden disc floating in a bucket half filled with seawater. You steady it, mark the pin's shadow at true noon, then compare length against a carved notch. The reading confirms you're hugging the southern edge of Greenland's invisible fingertip, exactly where yesterday's storm shoved you. Mainstream fact number 2: sidles in combined use of sunstones and shadow boards let Norse crews maintain latitude within about 1 degree. Good enough to hit continents bigger than bragging rights. The raven chooses this scholarly moment to glide in, dropping a mussel onto your shadow board. It cracks shell with a decisive beak tap, slurps the contents, then wipes its face on your sleeve, clearly underwhelmed by academic demonstrations. You sigh, but the crew roars with laughter. Comic relief is harder to ration than bread. Afternoon settles into a meditative blur broken only by Skald Bjorn rehearsing jokes for tonight's saga slot. He tests one on you. Why did the Viking goat refuse fjord crossings? It couldn't fjord the toll. You groan, required by maritime law, but scribble it into the goat quotes codex because documentation is documentation. Near sunset, distant icebergs pearl the western skyline, low, pale rose like teeth of a sleeping leviathan. Freydis studies their spacing, murmurs their likely strays drifted south of Greenland's tip. Nevertheless, she assigns an extra watch. White hazards are sneaky after dusk. The goat is volunteered for sensory duty. Legend insists goats sense ice well before men. Joke number 3: rolls eyes. Watch a goat glare at emptiness all night, but you comply, shifting the hay net to starboard for optimal iceberg radar. Cooking fire crackles in a shield iron brazier. Dinner tonight. Seal stew courtesy of the Raven's earlier fish donation bulked out with dried lamb and barley. The aroma drifts savory with a kelpie note that reminds you of Thingvellir hot spring steam after rain. Skapti seasons bowls with a scandalous pinch of Russian pepper and passes them around. You sip, warmth slides down throat like liquefied hearth glowed at post-meal. Crew gathers near the mast for evening stories. Bjorn opens with a hero tale but cleverly folds in today's events. Our brave seal envoy scouted seas, the goat parleyed with wind, and the raven negotiated provisions. The story loops back to Kvaser's mead, now humorously brewed with lichen tonic, before landing on a cliffhanger about islands where grapes drip dew sweeter than crowberry jam. Laughter, groans, and dreamy sighs mingle in twilight as stars puncture velvety sky. Freydis points out a soft glow low on the horizon. Aurora beginning its nightly rehearsal. Greens spill upward, tinged pink like dawn climbing in reverse. You pull cloak tighter, step to the prow, and rest hands on the hammered cross and hammer emblem. Cold wood, warm heart. The goat nestles beside you. The raven lands on the goat's cape, hitching a free ride to stargazing seats. For a breath, everything, storm memories, blank maps, distant grapes, feels suspended, cradled in the slow heartbeat of the sea. You pocket the faith compass, its pebble parliament rattling a gentle lull. A silent vote of confidence, you decide. One more look aft. The wake scrawls silver calligraphy beneath aurora light, carving a history nobody yet has words for. Somewhere beyond that inky ledge awaits Vinland. Somewhere behind, Thingvelir's sagas still echo. Balanced between, you let eyelids drift half-mast, carried by timber creaks and goat snores. When you finally sway below deck, hammock rocking like a cradle hung from the moon, you think about tomorrow's unknowns. Ice teeth, fickle winds, maybe even grape-flavored negotiations with mermaids. But the thought doesn't scare. It thrills the way crisp air once thrilled beside steaming hot springs. You fall asleep smiling, hearing the raven mutter a final critique of Bjorn's goat pun, and dream of sunlight split twice through crystal, painting twin paths across converging seas. Dawn glimmers off the water like a field of shattered mirrors, but it's the cold that truly wakes you. Sharp, insistent, sliding through every seam in your cloak until toes stage a protest march. A quick peek over the gunwale shows why. Overnight, the scattered bergs have multiplied, a flotilla of white giants drifting silently around Vinsel. Some rise only a few feet. Others tower like petrified thunderheads, their bases tinted turquoise where centuries of compressed snow turn glassy. Joke number 1 buttons its parka and mutters that someone clearly left the freezer door open all night. Freydis is already on deck, sunstone useless in this overcast glare, so she's pacing the rail, counting icy obstacles like beads on an anxious rosary. Skapti joins her, squinting, then rallies the crew for Ice Ballet. Act 1. Your role? Bow lookout, goat liaison, and occasional comic relief, because nothing keeps spirits high like puns chilled to sub-zero. You trudge to the prow, goat at your heels, its cape repurposed as an impromptu neck warmer. The raven circles overhead, offering aerial reconnaissance. Each caw echoes off ice walls in eerie stereo. Mainstream historical fact tucks itself beside your ear. Early Norse sailors used long poles, ice staves, to nudge small bergs aside, preventing hull scrapes. Skapti passes you one such pole, alder wood tipped with a bronze cap. The metal feels as cold as the stare your stomach gives when reminded lichen tonic is on breakfast menu. You push against the nearest growler, a house-sized slab shaped like a sleeping walrus, and feel Vinsel respond with a gentle pivot. The goat sniffs the ice as it glides past, eyes wide, perhaps considering whether this oversized salt cube belongs in its personal snack category. Joke number 2 skitters in, suggesting goat-approved rebranding, Nordic snow-flavored mineral lick. Mid-maneuver, Bjorn appears, voice hushed, sharing a fringe tidbit. Some Greenland traders captured polar bear cubs among bergs, raising them on board to sell as royal pets in Europe. He winks at the goat, claiming joint custody applications are already in the works. You shiver, not entirely from cold, imagining a bear in a silk wig vying for bow real estate. Historians still argue whether such voyages routinely transported live bears or if saga authors exaggerated to spice up shipping manifests. Either way, you're grateful today's cargo limits itself to one fashion-forward ruminant. An hour of delicate dodging passes. Ice crunches softly against or blades, sounds like distant tambourines wrapped in snow. You learn to read the berg's subtle blue glow. The brighter the color, the deeper their submerged bellies. Danger for any keel. Freydis points out hoarfrost plumes rising off certain slabs, evidence of internal meltwater vents. She marks these on her wax tablet. Such notes could mean the difference between safe passage and accidental Titanic audition. Clouds thin somewhat, letting through a wan disk of sun that paints gold edges on every berg. Skapti orders a pause for warm gruel. Barley simmered with bits of dried apple saved from Thingvelir's trade fair. The aroma teases your nose like hearth smoke. You gulp a bowl. Sweetness revives fingers gone numb. Goat receives a double portion, its breath fogging the air in grateful puffs. The raven scavenges apple peel, then retires to the mast, fluffing feathers like a feathery heat lamp as crew eats. Bjorn shares another saga snippet describing the halfguffa. Sea mist monster said to mimic an island until ships anchor on its back, only to be swallowed whole when it dives. He glances at the bergs pointedly. Several resemble lumpy islets. Joke number 3 pops confetti, asking if anyone packed anti-monster insurance. Freydis smiles thinly but keeps scanning. You sense even seasoned navigators can't entirely dismiss myths when ice shapes shift like sleeping beasts. With bellies warmed, you resume the ballet. Wind shifts from north, corralling bergs into loose lanes. Freydis seizes opportunity, calling for half sail. Rune-spangled cloth bellies. Vinsel glides forward, threading between icy colossi that glow like cathedral windows lit from within. The goat balances with gymnast poise. The raven rides the airflow just ahead, its shadow flitting over blue-white walls in playful leaps. For a breathtaking span of minutes, the world consists solely of ship, ice, and a hush broken only by sloshing water and occasional goat commentary. Suddenly, the prow scrapes something hard. Not a berg sound comes from below. Skapti shouts, ordering sail dropped. Momentum dies, you peer over the side. Just beneath the surface lies a slab of old sea ice, flat as a tabletop, invisible until the sun's angle revealed it. Crew grabs ice staves, pushing Vinsel free with coordinated grunts. No damage, but adrenaline lingers like spilled ink. Quirky Tidbit hustles back on stage. Sailors sometimes carried lead-weighted feelers to probe for such plates. Primitive sonar via poking stick. You vow to craft one tonight from spare spear shafts and bronze nails. Historians still argue whether these devices were standard kit or improvisations born of icy terror. Your vote lands firmly on "Where's my poking stick, please?" By late afternoon, the berg field thins. Open ocean blinks beyond. Rolling swells flecked with whitecaps. Freydis announces latitude check. You help with shadowboard while she adjusts for the sun's low angle using a carved bone scale. Reading finished, she grins. Current position matches her planned safe corridor, south of the heaviest pack ice. Mainstream fact number 2 high-fives the math. Norse latitude navigation combined solar clues and prevailing wind lore. Remarkably effective long before sextants swaggered onto the scene.s relief spreads. Skapti calls for celebratory snacks. Crowberry jam slathered on, you guessed it, Thunderbread balls. The goat gets a jam-free version, sticky beard hazard, while the raven steals a jam smear directly from your slice, leaving a raspberry-colored beak stripe like accidental war paint. Joke number 4, bonus round. Quips that you've created the world's first avian lipstick influencer. The sun dips, lighting icebergs from within so they shine ember orange, a color your vocabulary fails to capture. Crew gathers quietly at the rail, mesmerized. Even Bjorn's jokes pause for the spectacle. You note how silence unites you more potently than chant or chore. For an instant, you feel Thingvelir's hot spring steam mingling with this frigid hush. Opposites married by shared awe, twilight deepens. Bergs recede astern like lanterns sinking into water. Freydis sets double watches for the night, wary of rogue flows. You take first shift with the goat, preferred iceberg detector, and settle at the bow, ice stave across lap, cloak pulled tight. Stars ignite overhead, mirrored in calm patches between swells. The raven dozes above, occasionally muttering cryptic syllables, perhaps recounting to dream listeners the day's frozen labyrinth. Hours later, your watch ends uneventfully, mercifully. You hand the stave to a yawning deckhand, scratch goat ears, and descend to the hold. Hammock sways, smelling faintly of jam and seaweed, comforting despite damp edges. You clutch the faith compass. Pebbles whisper like sand in an hourglass, reminding you time and distance keep sliding forward whether or not you take note. You resolve to mark today in the codex. We danced with glass giants and lived. Sleep descends quickly, buoyed by exhaustion and proud relief. Dreams bring shimmering berg arches turning into Thingvelir's obsidian windows, goat and raven performing duets on icy stages, and sunstones casting rainbow bridges between worlds. Somewhere within, scholars continue debating polar bear cargo logistics, but you hush them. There'll be time for footnotes later. For now, you drift beneath whalebone ribs, wrapped in storm-scarred sailcloth and the echo of ice cracking harmlessly behind. Content that Vinsel steers a little wiser through her blank-paged ocean. Morning arrives as a thin blue line between sea and sky, a boundary so delicate you almost expect it to fray if you look too hard. Fog clings to the water, drifting in tufts that swallow the horizon and make the deck feel like a floating island. You blink sleep from your eyes, toes curling in damp boots, and step onto planks slick with condensation. The goat greets you with a yawn and a headbutt to the thigh, its version of good morning, and a reminder that breakfast isn't optional. Joke number 1 yawns back, stretching imaginary arms and muttering that even the fog seems to be hitting snooze. Frydis is already at her post, sunstone in hand, but the mist diffuses light so thoroughly that the crystal offers only milky blurs. She tucks it away with a shrug and joins Skapti at the rail, both peering into the gray soup as if willing it to part. Mainstream historical fact sidles up. Norse navigators relied on sound as much as sight in fog, listening for distant surf, gull cries, or even the echo of cliffs bouncing off water. Frydis cups a hand to her ear, signaling silence. Crew stills, breath held, while the goat fidgets with the restraint of a toddler at nap time. You strain your ears. The world is muffled, waves lapping Vinsel's hull with gentle, wet kisses. Then, faint but unmistakable, comes a low, rhythmic roar, the sound of surf breaking on a rocky shore. Frydis points starboard, eyes alight. She orders oars readied. Skapti barks commands, and you join the line, gripping the polished wood as fog swirls around your wrists like ghostly bracelets. The goat, sensing excitement, bleats a question. The raven, perched on the mast, cocks its head and caws twice. Its signal for land ho, though today it could mean, I see breakfast or someone dropped a fish. Either way, anticipation crackles through the crew. Joke number 2 struts by, whispering that even the fog is in on the suspense. Like a stagehand holding the curtain closed just a little longer. Oars dip and pull, Vinsel gliding forward. The roar grows louder, a heartbeat beneath the mist. Suddenly, the fog thins just enough to reveal a dark smudge ahead. Land. Or at least the promise of it. Frydis leans over the prow, squinting, then grins. Coastline, she announces. Not cliffs, not fjords, gentle, wooded shore. Could be Vinland. A cheer erupts, rattling the rigging. The goat, startled, sneezes directly into your elbow. The raven flaps in circles, ribbons streaming like a victory banner. You pat the goat's head, then lean over the rail, peering at the emerging shoreline. Trees crowd the water's edge, their tops lost in fog, trunks rising from a tangle of ferns and moss. The air smells of pine, damp earth, and something sweet you can't name. Grapes, maybe, or wild berries. Skapti orders anchor dropped in a sheltered cove. The crew scrambles to secure lines, lower the small skiff, and stow gear. You're assigned to the first landing party, goat liaison naturally, and help the animal into the boat, its cape flapping like a tiny sail. The raven opts to fly, circling overhead as you row toward shore. The skiff bumps against a mossy bank. You step onto soil so soft it feels like walking on a living carpet. The goat leaps out, snorts, then begins nibbling ferns with the enthusiasm of a connoisseur at a buffet. The raven lands on a nearby branch, eyeing the undergrowth for snacks. Frydis leads the group inland, her wax tablet at the ready. The forest is dense but not oppressive. Sunlight filters through fog and leaves, dappling the ground in gold and green. Mainstream historical fact tiptoes along. Norse explorers described Vinland as rich with timber, wild grapes, and gentle currents. A land where even the soil felt welcoming. You trail your fingers along a vine heavy with small, dark berries. Not grapes, but close enough to spark hope. Skald Bjorn bends to pluck a handful, pops one in his mouth and grins. Sweet, he declares. Not quite crowberry, not quite grape, somewhere in between. He offers you a berry. The flavor bursts on your tongue, tart and juicy, with a hint of honey. Quirky tidbit sidles up. Sagas claim Norse foragers sometimes mistook local berries for grapes, leading to both culinary experiments and, on occasion, regrettable stomachaches. Historians still argue whether these mix-ups were common or just colorful excuses for overindulgence. You mark the spot in your codex, sketching the vine and adding a caption. First taste of Vinland, berry, not grape, but close enough for government work. The goat, meanwhile, has discovered a patch of clover and is munching with the single-minded focus of a gourmet. Freydis calls for a perimeter check. You fan out, scanning for signs of habitation, smoke, footprints, anything. The forest is quiet except for bird chatter and the occasional rustle of small animals. Skapti finds a stream bubbling over smooth stones, its water clear and cold. He fills a skin, tastes it, and nods approval. Sweet as spring, he says. No salt, no peat, good drinking. The raven, ever the opportunist, swoops down to inspect a cluster of mussels clinging to a submerged rock. It pries one open with its beak, slurps the contents, and drops the shell at your feet. A gift, or perhaps a hint for future meals. Joke number 3 flaps in, suggesting the bird is angling for a promotion to chief shellfish officer. By midday, the fog lifts entirely, revealing a sky so blue it feels painted on. The crew gathers on the shore, sharing bread, cheese, and the new berries. Freydis unfurls her birch bark map, marking the cove with a rune. Skapti proposes a toast with spring water. Everyone raises their cups, grinning. The goat, not to be left out, bleats and headbutts a nearby log for emphasis. You lean against a sun-warmed rock, listening to the forest hum. The raven preens on a branch above. The goat dozes in a patch of clover, cape rumpled, belly full. Freydis sits beside you, her face relaxed for the first time in days. We made it, she murmurs. First landfall west of Greenland. Not bad for a crew with a goat and a raven. You nod, feeling a swell of pride and relief. The journey isn't over. There are still grapes to find, timber to cut, maybe even new sagas to write. But for now, this soft shore and sweet berry air are enough. You close your eyes, letting the sun warm your face, and think of Thingvellir steam, the obsidian church, the pebble parliament. All of it feels present here, carried in memory and the steady beat of your heart. As afternoon shadows stretch. You help gather firewood and pitch a temporary camp. Skald Bjorn regales the group with tales of past explorers who mistook berries for grapes, or grapes for berries, or, in one case, a friendly walrus for a grumpy uncle. Laughter rings through the trees, blending with birdsong and the gentle lap of waves. Night falls softly, stars pricking through the canopy. You nestle into your cloak, faith compass and codex tucked close. The goat curls nearby, breath steady. The raven roosts overhead, feathers fluffed against the cool air. The forest murmurs around you, a lullaby of leaves and distant surf. You drift to sleep with the taste of berries on your tongue and the certainty that tomorrow will bring new wonders. Grapes, maybe, or at least another chapter in the ongoing saga of goat, raven, and crew. For now, you rest, cradled by land that feels both foreign and familiar, knowing that no matter how far you sail, Thingvellir's steam will always curl through your dreams. Morning in Vinland creeps in on cat paws, sunlight filtering through leaves in shifting golden coins that dance over your cloak. The goat is already up, nose deep in a patch of clover, while the raven perches on a low branch, preening feathers and eyeing the world like a skeptical critic. Joke number 1 stretches, yawns, and remarks that even the forest seems to be waiting for coffee. Too bad lichen tonic is still the closest thing to caffeine on the manifest. You sit up, stretch, and inhale air thick with pine, damp earth, and the faint tang of something fruity, maybe wild grapes, maybe just wishful thinking. Friday is already organizing the day's tasks. Timber scouts, berry foragers, and a small group to explore upstream. You volunteer for the latter, partly for adventure, partly because goat wrangling in the woods beats chopping logs. Skapti hands out short axes and knives, reminding everyone to mark trail trees with runes so no one gets lost. Mainstream historical fact strolls along. Norse explorers left carved symbols on trees and boulders to guide future travelers, early geotagging minus the selfies. You pocket a bit of charcoal for quick sketches, then set off with Freydis, Bjorn, the goat, and the raven, who seems determined to lead from above. The forest is alive with birdsong and rustling leaves. Sunlight dapples the path, and every few steps you spot another vine heavy with those sweet tart berries. Bjorn plucks a handful, pops one in his mouth, and declares, "Still not grapes, but I'd trade a barrel of crowberry jam for a bushel of these." He tosses a berry to the goat, who sniffs, then crunches it with a thoughtful expression. You follow the stream inland, water chuckling over smooth stones. The raven swoops ahead, occasionally cawing to point out a particularly juicy berry patch or a cluster of mussels in a shallow pool. Corky tidbit flutters in. Some Norse explorers claimed local birds would lead them to food if they paid attention. Avian tour guides, if you will. Historians still argue whether this was observation or superstition, but you're inclined to trust your feathered scout. The forest grows denser, vines twisting up tree trunks, ferns unfurling like green scrolls. You pause to mark a trail tree with a simple rune, a sideways F for follow, then press on. Suddenly, the raven shrieks and dives into a thicket. You hurry after, pushing aside branches to find the bird perched on a low-hanging vine heavy with clusters of small, round fruit. Freydis gasps. "Grapes," she whispers. You pluck one, roll it between your fingers, then bite. The flavor bursts, sweet, tangy, unmistakably grape. Joke number 2 cartwheels in, crowing that you've officially graduated from berry forager to grape gourmet. The goat, not to be outdone, stretches up on hind legs to nibble a low cluster, cape flapping like a tiny toga. Freydis marks the spot on her wax tablet, then helps you gather a basketful. The raven watches, head tilted, as if calculating how many grapes equal one herring in avian economics. Bjorn, meanwhile, composes an impromptu verse. "Grapes for the crew, / grapes for the goat, / grapes for the raven / if it doesn't float." You continue upstream, basket growing heavier. The forest opens into a sunlit glade where wildflowers sway in the breeze. At the center, a mossy boulder sits like a throne. The goat claims it instantly, striking a pose worthy of a saga hero. The raven lands on your shoulder, nibbling a grape you offer, then tucking the rest into its beak for later. Freydis spreads out her map, marking the grape glade with a rune and a tiny sketch of a cluster. "We'll come back with more baskets," she says. "If we're lucky, we'll find enough to press for wine, or at least jam that actually tastes like grapes." Mainstream fact number 2 saunters by. Norse sagas mention wild grapes in Vinland, but scholars debate whether they were true vitis or just similar berries. Either way, your taste buds aren't picky. Today, you're drinking in victory, one juicy bite at a time. On the return trip, you mark more trail trees, pausing to admire a waterfall that cascades into a crystal pool. The raven dips its beak, then shakes water everywhere like a feathered sprinkler. The goat, ever curious, wades in up to its knees, then sneezes loudly. Apparently Vinland water is colder than it looks. Back at camp, the timber scouts have returned with armloads of straight, sturdy saplings perfect for or shafts. The berry foragers have filled baskets with the sweet tart fruit, and the mood is buoyant. Skapti orders a feast: grilled fish, fresh bread, and, of course, grapes. The goat receives a double portion, its cape now accessorized with a grapevine garland. The raven, meanwhile, has stashed a cluster in the rigging. Avian wine cellar, vintage today. As evening falls, the crew gathers around the fire. Skald Bjorn tells the story of your grape discovery, embellishing just enough to make the goat the hero and the raven the wise counselor. Laughter rings through the trees, blending with the crackle of flames and the distant hoot of an owl. You lean back, faith compass warm in your pocket, pebbles rattling softly. The goat dozes at your feet, grape-stained lips twitching in sleep. The raven perches on a nearby log, one eye on the fire, one on the sky. Freydis sits beside you, her face lit by flickering light. "Not bad for a day's work," she murmurs. You nod, gazing at the stars beginning to prick through the canopy. "Tomorrow, there will be more exploring, more grapes to gather, maybe even a toast with the first Vinland wine. But for now, you're content to rest, surrounded by new friends, old traditions, and the sweet taste of discovery." The forest hums a lullaby of leaves and water. You close your eyes, listening to the steady breath of the goat, the rustle of the raven's feathers, the distant murmur of the sea. Somewhere beyond the trees, Vinsel waits, ready for the next chapter. But tonight, you are here, in Vinland's embrace, with stories yet to tell and dreams as endless as the stars. Morning in Vinland's glade greets you with birdsong so cheerful it almost sounds rehearsed. The goat is already up, grazing on dew-drenched clover, while the raven perches on a log, eyeing you expectantly, clearly waiting for its daily grape ration. Joke number 1 ruffles its feathers. Breakfast is served, but only if you're winged and persistent. You stretch, muscles humming from yesterday's forest trek, and join the crew gathering around the fire pit. Skapti stirs a pot of barley porridge sweetened with yesterday's grape haul. The scent is warm, earthy, and just a little bit wild. Freydis spreads out her wax tablet, sketching a rough map of the grape glade and marking trail trees with neat runes. Mainstream historical fact peeks over her shoulder. Norse explorers often left detailed records of new lands, blending practical notes with saga-worthy flourishes, early travel blogging, minus the hashtags. After breakfast, you're assigned to the grape-gathering detail. Armed with baskets and knives, you set off with Freydis, Bjorn, the goat, now sporting a grapevine wreath like a woodland emperor, and the ever-watchful raven. The forest is alive with morning light, shafts of gold piercing through leaves to spotlight mossy boulders and trickling streams. The goat trots ahead, sniffing out the juiciest clusters, while the raven swoops from vine to vine, occasionally plucking a grape and dropping it into your basket. Avian quality control at its finest. Bjorn, meanwhile, composes a new verse for each discovery. Here a grape, there a grape, everywhere a grape, sung to the tune of an old herding song. Joke number 2 grins, suggesting that if Norse explorers had streaming services, this would be the top playlist. You fill basket after basket, pausing only to mark trail trees with charcoal runes. The grapevines are thick and healthy, heavy with fruit that bursts sweetly on your tongue. Quirky tidbit sidles up. Some sagas claim Norse foragers pressed grapes using hollowed-out logs and bare feet, a method both rustic and uncomfortably intimate. Historians still argue whether this was common practice or just colorful rumor, but you file the idea away for later. Maybe after a few rounds of celebratory wine by midday, your group has gathered enough grapes to fill several large baskets. Freydis calls a halt, and you rest in the glade, sharing bread, cheese, and, of course, grapes. The goat sprawls in a patch of sunlight, looking smug and slightly grape-stained. The raven, ever the opportunist, has tucked a cluster into a hollow tree. Apparently planning a private tasting later, back at camp, the timber scouts have returned with more saplings and a few logs of sturdy oak. Skapti inspects the haul, pronouncing it perfect for new oars and maybe even a spare mast. The berry foragers, meanwhile, have filled baskets with the sweet tart fruit, and the cook is already stirring a pot of jam over the fire. The air is thick with the scent of bubbling fruit and wood smoke, a smell that feels both foreign and familiar, like Thingvelir's steam, but with a hint of wild sweetness. Freydis gathers the crew and announces the next task, pressing the grapes. She leads the way to a flat rock near the stream, where you lay out a clean cloth and begin crushing the fruit with wooden paddles. The goat watches, fascinated, then tries to help by stepping into the mash, a move quickly vetoed by Skapti. The raven, ever the critic, perches on a nearby branch and caws approval or disdain, depending on your technique. Juice flows into a birch bark trough, deep purple and fragrant. Freydis dips a cup, offers it to you. You sip, The flavor is raw, tangy, and surprisingly potent. Not wine yet, she says, but a good start. Mainstream fact number 2: strolls by Norse explorers likely fermented grape juice in animal skins or hollowed logs, letting wild yeast work its magic. You imagine future toasts aboard Vinsel, cups raised to Vinland's bounty as the sun begins to dip. You help strain the juice into leather flasks, then tuck them into a cool spot by the stream to ferment. The goat, now thoroughly grape-stained, dozes by the fire. The raven, having sampled enough juice to be pleasantly buzzed, mutters nonsense syllables and preens its feathers with exaggerated care. Joke number 3 flaps in, suggesting the bird is now officially the cruise sommelier, avian wine critic at your service. Evening brings a feast: grilled fish, fresh bread, grape jam, and a small taste of the unfermented juice. Skald Bjorn tells the story of your grape-pressing adventure, embellishing just enough to make the goat the hero and the raven the wise, if slightly tipsy, counselor. Laughter rings through the trees, blending with the crackle of flames and the distant hoot of an owl. You lean back, faith compass warm in your pocket, pebbles rattling softly. The goat snores at your feet, grape-stained lips twitching. The raven perches on a log, one eye on the fire, one on the sky. Frydis sits beside you, her face lit by flickering light. Not bad for a day's work, she murmurs. You nod, gazing at the stars beginning to prick through the canopy. Tomorrow there will be more exploring, more grapes to press, maybe even a toast with the first Vinland wine. But for now, you're content to rest, surrounded by new friends, old traditions, and the sweet taste of discovery. The forest hums a lullaby of leaves and water. You close your eyes, listening to the steady breath of the goat, the rustle of the raven's feathers, the distant murmur of the sea. Somewhere beyond the trees, Vinsel waits, ready for the next chapter. But tonight, you are here, in Vinland's embrace, with stories yet to tell and dreams as endless as the stars. Dawn in Vinland arrives with a mist that clings to the trees, turning the glade into a dreamscape of silver and green. You wake to the sound of the goat munching on grape leaves, its wreath now slightly lopsided, and the raven perched on your pack, eyeing yesterday's grape pressings with undisguised interest. Joke number 1 stretches, yawns, and mutters that even the forest seems to be nursing a mild hangover. Avian wine critics notwithstanding. Breakfast is a quiet affair. Barley porridge sweetened with grape jam, a cup of cool stream water, and a handful of fresh berries. The crew moves with purpose, packing baskets, sharpening axes, and checking the fermenting grape juice tucked in its shady nook. Frydis consults her wax tablet, marking the day's goals. More timber, more grapes, and a survey of the nearby hills for signs of game or, just maybe, other inhabitants. You volunteer for the timber crew, eager to see more of Vinland's woods. Skapti leads the way, his axe slung over one shoulder, while the goat trots alongside, ever curious, and the raven scouts from above. The forest is dense but inviting, sunlight filtering through leaves to paint the ground in shifting patterns. Mainstream historical fact tiptoes along. Norse explorers prized Vinland's timber for its straight grain and abundance, ideal for shipbuilding, tool handles, and, if you're feeling fancy, decorative carvings. You pause to mark trail trees with runes, then press on, following Skapti's steady pace. The goat discovers a patch of wild mint and begins grazing with gusto, its breath suddenly minty fresh. The raven, meanwhile, has found a cluster of hazelnuts and is busy cracking them open on a flat rock. Avian nutcracker, at your service. Mid-morning, you reach a stand of tall oaks, their trunks straight and strong. Skapti selects a few for felling, and the crew sets to work, axes biting into wood with rhythmic thunks. The goat watches, occasionally bleating encouragement or, more likely, requesting a snack break. Joke number 2 flutters by, suggesting the goat is angling for a promotion to Timber Quality Assurance Officer. As logs are trimmed and bundled, you spot movement in the undergrowth. A flash of brown fur, the flick of a bushy tail. A fox watches from a safe distance, eyes bright with curiosity. Quirky tidbit trots in. Norse sagas sometimes mention encounters with local wildlife, from foxes to deer to, in one memorable case, a moose mistaken for a land-dwelling whale. Historians still argue whether these tales were accurate or just colorful exaggerations, but you're inclined to believe the fox is real, and possibly judging your axe technique. By midday, the timber crew has gathered enough wood for several new oars and a spare mast. You rest in the shade, sharing bread, cheese, and a handful of hazelnuts courtesy of the raven. The goat, now thoroughly minty, dozes in a patch of sunlight, its wreath askew but still regal. After lunch, Frydis leads a small group, you, Bjorn, the goat, and the raven, on a survey of the nearby hills. The climb is gentle, the air crisp and clean. From the crest, you can see the forest stretching to the horizon, the glint of the stream winding through the trees, and, far below, the cove where Vinsel waits. Frydis points out a faint plume of smoke rising from a distant ridge. Could be a campfire, she murmurs. Or maybe lightning struck a tree. You exchange glances. Could this be a sign of other people? The raven caws, as if weighing in on the mystery. You mark the spot on your codex, sketching the ridge and the smoke. Bjorn composes a verse about smoke on the water, fire in the sky, then amends it to smoke on the ridge, maybe a pie. Joke number 3 grins, suggesting that if you find a bakery in the wilderness, you've officially discovered Valhalla's catering service. The afternoon slips by in a haze of exploration and speculation. You return to camp as the sun begins to dip, arms laden with hazelnuts, mint, and a few more grapes for good measure. The timber crew has already begun shaping the new oars, and the cook is stirring a pot of fish stew flavored with wild herbs. Evening brings a feast under the stars. Grilled fish, fresh bread, grape jam, and a small taste of the fermenting juice, now bubbling gently, its aroma rich and promising. Skald Bjorn tells the story of the day's adventures, embellishing just enough to make the goat the hero and the raven the wise, if slightly nutty counselor. Laughter rings through the trees, blending with the crackle of flames and the distant hoot of an owl. You lean back, faith compass warm in your pocket, pebbles rattling softly. The goat snores at your feet, minty breath puffing in the cool air. The raven perches on a log, one eye on the fire, one on the sky. Frydis sits beside you, her face lit by flickering light. Not bad for a day's work, she murmurs. You nod, gazing at the stars beginning to prick through the canopy. Tomorrow there will be more exploring, more grapes to press, maybe even a visit to that mysterious ridge. But for now, you're content to rest, surrounded by new friends, old traditions, and the sweet taste of discovery. The forest hums a lullaby of leaves and water. You close your eyes, listening to the steady breath of the goat, the rustle of the raven's feathers, the distant murmur of the sea. Somewhere beyond the trees, Vinsel waits, ready for the next chapter. But tonight you are here, in Vinland's embrace, with stories yet to tell and dreams as endless as the stars. The morning sun filters softly through the canopy, casting dappled light on the camp where the crew stirs awake. The goat, now sporting a slightly wilted grapevine wreath, stretches and ambles toward the stream for a morning drink, while the raven preens its feathers, eyeing the horizon with a keen, watchful gaze. Joke number 1 flutters by, noting that even the forest's early risers need a moment to shake off the dew. You rise, muscles still humming from yesterday's timber haul, and join the crew around the fire pit. Skapti is already stoking the embers, preparing a pot of barley porridge sweetened with wild honey and a handful of the freshly gathered grapes. Frydis consults her wax tablet, marking the day's agenda. Exploring the ridge where smoke was spotted, scouting for game, and mapping the surrounding forest. The group sets off mid-morning, the goat leading the way with surprising sure-footedness, and the raven circling overhead, occasionally diving to inspect promising berry patches. Mainstream historical fact drifts in. Norse explorers often relied on natural landmarks and animal behavior to navigate unfamiliar terrain. Blending practical knowledge with a touch of superstition as you ascend the ridge, the forest thickens, the air rich with the scent of pine and earth. The smoke plume grows clearer, revealing a small clearing where a modest campfire smokes gently. You approach cautiously, senses alert for signs of other inhabitants. To your surprise, you find a small group of indigenous people, their expressions curious but welcoming. Frydis steps forward, offering a greeting in a mixture of Old Norse and gestures. The encounter is tentative but peaceful, A moment suspended between worlds. Quirky tidbit arrives. Some sagas hint at early Norse encounters with native peoples, often shrouded in mystery and myth, blending fact with folklore. Historians still debate the nature and extent of these meetings, but your own experience adds a new chapter to the ongoing story. The indigenous group shares food and stories, their voices weaving a tapestry of land, sea, and sky. You listen, captivated by tales of the forest spirits and the rhythms of the seasons, feeling the deep connection between people and place. The goat, ever the diplomat, nuzzles a child who offers a handful of berries, while the raven perches nearby, observing with quiet interest. You exchange gifts, a carved wooden pendant for a woven basket, and feel the fragile threads of friendship begin to weave as the sun dips low. The two groups share a meal beneath the spreading branches, the firelight flickering on faces old and new. Skald Bjorn composes a new verse, celebrating the meeting of worlds, the blending of stories, and the promise of peace. You tuck the day's events into your codex, sketching the campfire and the figures gathered around it. The forest hums a lullaby of leaves and distant waves, and you close your eyes, feeling the steady breath of the goat, the rustle of the raven's feathers, and the gentle pulse of a story unfolding across time. Morning arrives with a soft, golden light that filters through the trees, illuminating the camp where the crew and their new friends stir awake. The goat, now a seasoned ambassador, nibbles on a handful of berries offered by a child, while the raven perches on a low branch, watching the mingling of people with quiet curiosity. Joke number 1 flutters down, remarking that even the forest seems to be holding its breath, waiting to see what today will bring. You rise, stretching muscles warmed by yesterday's peaceable encounter, and join the group around the fire pit. Skapti is already stirring a pot of porridge enriched with wild honey and fresh berries, the aroma mingling with the scent of pine and earth. Frydis consults her wax tablet, marking the day's agenda. More exploring, more mapping, and, perhaps, a shared hunt with your new companions. The indigenous group invites the crew to join them in a morning hunt, eager to share their knowledge of the land. You set off together, the goat trotting alongside, its grapevine wreath now accessorized with a feather gifted by a child. The raven, ever the scout, flies ahead, occasionally calling back with news of game or interesting landmarks. Mainstream historical fact tiptoes in. Norse sagas sometimes mention cooperation with local peoples, blending skills and knowledge for mutual benefit. Early cross-cultural teamwork, minus the paperwork. As you move through the forest, your companions point out animal tracks, medicinal plants, and hidden streams. You learn to read the subtle signs of deer and rabbit, and to listen for the rustle of birds that signal nearby water. The goat, ever helpful, sniffs out a patch of wild mint, its breath suddenly as fresh as a spring morning. Quirky tidbit sidles up. Some Norse explorers adopted local techniques for hunting and foraging, blending old traditions with new discoveries. Proof that curiosity and cooperation make for the best sagas. Mid-morning, the group spots a deer grazing at the edge of a clearing. The hunt is swift and respectful, guided by quiet signals and shared purpose. The goat, perhaps sensing the gravity of the moment, stands still and silent, its wreath of grapevine and feather catching the sunlight. After the hunt, you return to camp with fresh meat and new stories. The indigenous group teaches you how to prepare the game using herbs and wild onions, their hands moving with practiced ease. You help, learning the rhythm of the work, the laughter and conversation flowing as freely as the stream nearby. Skapti and the timber crew begin shaping new oars from yesterday's haul, their axes singing in harmony with the forest's morning chorus. The cook stirs a pot of stew, the scent of venison and herbs filling the air. The goat, now a minor celebrity, is offered a taste of everything, its cape and wreath drawing admiring glances from children and adults alike as afternoon light slants through the trees. You join the indigenous group in a quiet ceremony by the stream. They offer thanks to the land and the animals, their voices soft and reverent. You listen, feeling the weight of the moment, the sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. Skald Bjorn composes a new verse, weaving together the threads of the day. The hunt, the sharing, the laughter, and the quiet gratitude. Laughter rings through the trees, blending with the crackle of the fire and the distant hoot of an owl. You lean back, faith compass warm in your pocket, pebbles rattling softly. The goat dozes at your feet, its wreath slightly askew. The raven perches on a log, one eye on the fire, one on the sky. Frydis sits beside you, her face lit by flickering light. Not bad for a day's work, she murmurs. You nod, gazing at the stars beginning to prick through the canopy. Tomorrow, there will be more exploring, more stories to share, maybe even a toast with the first Vinland wine. But for now, you're content to rest, surrounded by new friends, old traditions, and the sweet taste of discovery. The forest hums a lullaby of leaves and water. You close your eyes, listening to the steady breath of the goat, the rustle of the raven's feathers, the distant murmur of the sea. Somewhere beyond the trees, Vinsel waits, ready for the next chapter. But tonight, you are here, in Vinland's embrace, with stories yet to tell and dreams as endless as the stars. Morning in Vinland dawns with a gentle mist that curls around the trees, softening the edges of the world and making the camp feel like a dream. The goat, now a full-fledged member of both crews, wakes early and trots between sleeping forms, its grapevine and feather wreath a little more bedraggled but no less regal. The raven, perched on a low branch, watches the scene with the air of a seasoned diplomat, occasionally preening a feather or offering a soft caw. Joke number one stretches and murmurs that even the mist seems to be tiptoeing. As if afraid to wake the forest, you rise, muscles pleasantly tired from yesterday's hunt and the evening's storytelling, and join the group around the fire pit. Skapti is already stirring a pot of venison stew from yesterday's hunt, the scent mingling with the piney air. Frydis consults her wax tablet, marking the day's agenda, more mapping, a visit to the grape glade to check the fermenting juice, and perhaps a shared fishing trip with your new friends. The indigenous group, now comfortable with the crew, invites everyone to join them at the stream for morning fishing. You set off together, the goat leading the way with its usual curiosity, and the raven circling overhead, occasionally diving to inspect a likely spot. Mainstream historical fact saunters alongside. Norse explorers often learned fishing techniques from local peoples, blending their own methods with new knowledge. Early cultural exchange, with nets and lines instead of handshakes that the stream. Your companions demonstrate how to weave simple nets from willow branches and plant fibers, their hands moving with practiced ease. You try your hand, fingers clumsy at first, but soon falling into the rhythm. The goat, ever helpful, wades in up to its knees, snuffling at the water and startling a few fish into the waiting nets. Quirky tidbit drifts in. Some sagas mention animals helping with fishing, though whether by design or accident is still debated by historians. Either way, the goat's antics earn laughter and a few extra fish for the pot to by mid-morning. The group has gathered a basketful of trout and a few fat crayfish. The raven, ever the opportunist, snatches a crayfish from the shallows and retreats to a sunny rock to enjoy its prize. You mark the spot on your codex, sketching the stream and the figures gathered along its banks. Back at camp, the cook stirs the stew, adding the fresh fish and a handful of wild herbs. The aroma is rich and inviting, and the crew gathers around, sharing stories and laughter. The indigenous group teaches a few words of their language, and you try your best to repeat them, earning smiles and gentle corrections. The goat, now the center of attention, is offered a taste of everything, its wreath festooned with a new feather from a child's hair. After lunch, Frydis leads a small group, you, Bjorn, the goat, and the raven, to the grape glade to check the fermenting juice. The leather flasks bubble gently, their contents dark and fragrant. Frydis dips a cup, offers you a sip. The flavor is tart and complex, with a hint of wild yeast and sunshine. Not wine yet, she says, but getting closer. Mainstream fact number 2 strolls by. Wild fermentation can take days or weeks, depending on temperature and yeast. Patience is the true secret ingredient. You mark the progress in your codex, sketching the flasks and the glade, and adding a note about the shared fishing trip. Bjorn composes a new verse, celebrating the blending of old and new, of nets and lines, of stories and laughter. Joke number 2 flutters in, suggesting that if the goat keeps helping with fishing, it might earn a permanent spot on the crew's payroll. Afternoon light softens. The group returns to camp, arms laden with fresh herbs and a few more grapes for the fermenting juice. The timber crew has finished shaping the new oars, their smooth wood gleaming in the sun. The cook is stirring another pot of stew, this time with crayfish and wild onions, the scent mingling with wood smoke and pine. Evening brings a feast under the stars. Stew, fresh bread, grape jam, and a small taste of the fermenting juice. Skald Bjorn tells the story of the day's adventures, embellishing just enough to make the goat the hero and the raven the wise, if slightly shellfish-obsessed, counselor. Laughter rings through the trees, blending with the crackle of flames and the distant hoot of an owl. You lean back, faith compass warm in your pocket, pebbles rattling softly. The goat dozes at your feet, its wreath now a chaotic masterpiece of grapevine and feathers. The raven perches on a log, one eye on the fire, one on the sky. Freydis sits beside you, her face lit by flickering light. "Not bad for a day's work," she murmurs. You nod, gazing at the stars beginning to prick through the canopy. Tomorrow, there will be more exploring, more stories to share, maybe even a toast with the first Vinland wine. But for now, you're content to rest, surrounded by new friends, old traditions, and the sweet taste of discovery. The forest hums a lullaby of leaves and water. You close your eyes, listening to the steady breath of the goat, the rustle of the raven's feathers, the distant murmur of the sea. Somewhere beyond the trees, Vinsel waits, ready for the next chapter. But tonight, you are here, in Vinland's embrace, with stories yet to tell and dreams as endless as the stars. Dawn in Vinland arrives with a hush so deep it feels almost reverent. Mist lingers in the glade, softening the edges of the camp and making the world seem newly painted. The goat, ever the early riser, stretches and shakes its grapevine and feather wreath, sending a few loose feathers twirling to the ground. The raven, perched on a nearby stump, watches the proceedings with the air of a judge at a very relaxed court. Joke number 1 yawns and mutters that even the mist seems to be waiting for its morning coffee. Too bad lichen tonic is the only brew on offer. You rise, muscles pleasantly stiff from yesterday's fishing and grape tending, and join the crew around the fire pit. Skapti is already stirring a pot of crayfish stew, the scent mingling with the crisp morning air. Freydis consults her wax tablet, marking the day's agenda, more mapping, a final check on the fermenting grape juice, and a shared foraging trip with your new friends. The indigenous group, now as much a part of the camp as the goat, invites everyone to join them in gathering wild herbs and roots. You set off together, the goat leading the way with its usual curiosity, and the raven circling overhead, occasionally diving to inspect a promising patch of greenery. Mainstream historical fact tiptoes along. Norse explorers often learned about local plants from indigenous peoples, blending their own knowledge with new discoveries, early herbalism with a side of cultural exchange. As you walk, your companions point out edible roots, medicinal leaves, and fragrant flowers. You try your hand at digging, fingers soon stained with earth and sap, and learn to recognize the subtle differences between plants. The goat, ever helpful, sniffs out a patch of wild garlic, its breath suddenly as pungent as a Viking feast. Quirky tidbit sidles up. Some sagas mention animals helping with foraging, though whether by design or accident is still debated by historians. Either way, the goat's nose proves invaluable, and you fill your baskets with greens, roots, and a few early mushrooms. By mid-morning, the group has gathered enough for a feast. The raven, ever the opportunist, plucks a mushroom from your basket and retreats to a sunny rock to inspect its prize. You mark the spot on your codex, sketching the glade and the figures bent over their baskets. Back at camp, the cook stirs the stew, adding the fresh herbs and wild garlic. The aroma is rich and inviting, and the crew gathers around, sharing stories and laughter. The indigenous group teaches a few more words of their language, and you try your best to repeat them, earning smiles and gentle corrections. The goat, now the center of attention, is offered a taste of everything, its wreath now a riot of grapevine, feathers, and a few stray leaves. After lunch, Freydis leads a small group, you, Bjorn, the goat, and the raven, to the grape glade for a final check on the fermenting juice. The leather flasks bubble gently, their contents dark and fragrant. Freydis dips a cup, offers you a sip. The flavor is tart and complex, with a hint of wild yeast and sunshine. Almost wine, she says, smiling. Mainstream fact number 2: strolls by wild fermentation can take days or weeks, but the taste is worth the wait. Patience is the true secret ingredient. You mark the progress in your codex, sketching the flasks and the glade, and adding a note about the shared foraging trip. Bjorn composes a new verse, celebrating the blending of old and new, of roots and leaves, of stories and laughter. Joke number 2 flutters in, suggesting that if the goat keeps helping with foraging, it might earn a permanent spot on the crew's payroll. As afternoon light softens, the group returns to camp, arms laden with fresh herbs and a few more grapes for the fermenting juice. The timber crew has finished shaping the new oars, their smooth wood gleaming in the sun. The cook is stirring another pot of stew, this time with wild mushrooms and garlic, the scent mingling with wood smoke and pine. Evening brings a feast under the stars. Stew, fresh bread, grape jam, and a small taste of the fermenting juice. Skald Bjorn tells the story of the day's adventures, embellishing just enough to make the goat the hero and the raven the wise, if slightly mushroom-obsessed, counselor. Laughter rings through the trees, blending with the crackle of flames and the distant hoot of an owl. You lean back, faith compass warm in your pocket, pebbles rattling softly. The goat dozes at your feet, its wreath now a chaotic masterpiece of grapevine, feathers, and leaves. The raven perches on a log, one eye on the fire, one on the sky. Frydis sits beside you, her face lit by flickering light. Not bad for a day's work, she murmurs. You nod, gazing at the stars beginning to prick through the canopy. Tomorrow, there will be more exploring, more stories to share, maybe even a toast with the first Vinland wine. But for now, you're content to rest, surrounded by new friends, old traditions, and the sweet taste of discovery. The forest hums a lullaby of leaves and water. You close your eyes, listening to the steady breath of the goat, the rustle of the raven's feathers, the distant murmur of the sea. Somewhere beyond the trees, Vinsel waits, ready for the next chapter. But tonight, you are here, in Vinland's embrace, with stories yet to tell and dreams as endless as the stars. Morning in Vinland arrives with a gentle breeze that rustles the leaves and sends dew sparkling across the grass. The goat, now a living legend in its own grapevine and feather wreath, wakes first and nudges you with its nose, as if to say, time to rise and see what today's adventure holds. The raven, perched on a low branch, watches with quiet amusement, occasionally preening a feather or offering a soft caw. Joke number 1 stretches and yawns, muttering that even the goat's wake-up calls are becoming more diplomatic. You rise, muscles pleasantly tired from yesterday's foraging and grape tending, and join the crew around the fire pit. Skapti is already stirring a pot of wild mushroom and garlic stew, the scent mingling with the crisp morning air. Frydis consults her wax tablet, marking the day's agenda. A final tasting of the fermenting grape juice, a farewell feast with your new friends, and preparations for the journey home. The indigenous group, now as much a part of the crew as the goat and the raven, joins you for breakfast. You share stew, fresh bread, and stories, the laughter and conversation flowing as freely as the stream nearby. The goat, ever the center of attention, is offered a taste of everything, its wreath now a riot of grapevine, feathers, and a few stray leaves. After breakfast, Frydis leads the group to the grape glade for the final tasting. The leather flasks bubble gently, their contents dark and fragrant. She dips a cup, offers you a sip. The flavor is tart and complex, with a hint of wild yeast and sunshine. Vinland's first wine, she declares, smiling. Mainstream historical fact strolls by. Wild fermentation is unpredictable, but when it works, the result is a taste as unique as the land itself. You mark the moment in your codex, sketching the flasks and the figures gathered in the glade. Back at camp, preparations begin for the farewell feast. The cook stirs a pot of stew, adding the last of the fresh herbs and wild garlic. The timber crew packs the new oars and spare mast, their smooth wood gleaming in the sun. The indigenous group helps gather firewood and set up a circle of logs around the fire, a place for stories and laughter. As afternoon light softens, the feast begins. You share stew, fresh bread, grape jam, and the first taste of Vinland wine. Skald Bjorn tells the story of your adventures, embellishing just enough to make the goat the hero and the raven the wise, if slightly wine-tipsy counselor. Laughter rings through the trees, blending with the crackle of flames and the distant hoot of an owl. The indigenous group shares a song, their voices rising and falling like the wind through the leaves. You listen, feeling the weight of the moment, the sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. You offer a toast, raising your cup of Vinland wine to new friends, old traditions, and the promise of future stories. Evening brings a quiet hush, the firelight flickering on faces old and new. You lean back, faith compass warm in your pocket, pebbles rattling softly. The goat dozes at your feet, its wreath now a chaotic masterpiece of grapevine, feathers, and leaves. The raven perches on a log, one eye on the fire, one on the sky. Freydis sits beside you, her face lit by flickering light. Not bad for a day's work, she murmurs. You nod, gazing at the stars beginning to prick through the canopy. Tomorrow, you will return to Vinsel and set sail for home, carrying new stories, new friends, and the taste of Vinland wine. But for now, you're content to rest, surrounded by laughter, tradition, and the sweet promise of tomorrow's journey. The forest hums a lullaby of leaves and water. You close your eyes, listening to the steady breath of the goat, the rustle of the raven's feathers, the distant murmur of the sea. Somewhere beyond the trees, Vinsel waits, ready for the next chapter. But tonight, you are here, in Vinland's embrace, with stories yet to tell and dreams as endless as the stars. Morning in Vinland is quiet, the camp stirring with a sense of both anticipation and nostalgia. The goat, its wreath now a little more tattered but still regal, wakes you with a gentle nudge, its breath warm and minty. The raven, perched on a low branch, watches the preparations with quiet interest, occasionally offering a caw of encouragement or, more likely, a reminder about breakfast. Joke number one stretches and yawns, muttering that even the forest seems to be holding its breath, waiting to see what today will bring. You rise, muscles pleasantly stiff from yesterday's feast and storytelling, and join the crew around the fire pit. Skapti is already stirring a pot of porridge sweetened with wild honey and the last of the fresh berries. Freydis consults her wax tablet, marking the day's agenda. Final packing, a farewell to your new friends, and the journey back to Vinsel. The indigenous group joins you for breakfast, sharing stories and laughter, the mood bittersweet. You exchange gifts, a carved wooden pendant for a woven basket, a handful of grapes for a bundle of herbs, and promise to remember each other's stories. The goat, ever the diplomat, nuzzles a child who offers a feather for its wreath. The raven, ever the opportunist, snatches a berry from a basket and retreats to a sunny rock. After breakfast, you help pack the camp, stowing the new oars, spare mast, and baskets of grapes, herbs, and a few flasks of Vinland wine. The indigenous group walks with you to the shore, their voices soft and their smiles warm. You mark the moment in your codex, sketching the figures gathered on the beach, the goat and the raven at your side. At the water's edge, you say your goodbyes, the wind carrying your words across the waves. The indigenous group sings a farewell song, their voices rising and falling like the tide. You listen, feeling the weight of the moment, the sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. You board the skiff, the goat and the raven with you, and row out to Vinsel, waiting at anchor in the cove. The crew welcomes you aboard, their faces alight with excitement and a touch of sadness. Freydis raises a cup of Vinland wine, offering a toast to new friends, old traditions, and the promise of future stories as the sun climbs higher. You raise anchor and set sail, the wind filling the rune-painted sail and carrying you away from the shore. You glance back, watching the figures on the beach grow smaller, their voices blending with the wind and the waves. The goat stands at the prow, its wreath fluttering in the breeze, while the raven perches on the mast, its ribbon streaming like a flag. You lean on the rail, faith compass warm in your pocket, pebbles rattling softly. Freydis stands beside you, her face lit by the morning sun. Not bad for a day's work, she murmurs. You nod, gazing at the horizon, where sea and sky meet in a line as endless as your dreams. Tomorrow, you will be homeward bound, carrying new stories, new friends, and the taste of Vinland wine. But for now, you're content to sail, surrounded by laughter, tradition, and the sweet promise of tomorrow's journey. The sea hums a lullaby of wind and water. You close your eyes, listening to the steady breath of the goat, the rustle of the raven's feathers, the distant murmur of the shore. Somewhere ahead, home awaits, ready for the next chapter. But tonight you are here on Vinsel's deck, with stories yet to tell and dreams as endless as the stars. Dawn at sea arrives with a soft, golden light that spills across the waves, painting the deck of Vinsel in warm hues. The goat, its wreath now a little more wind-blown but still regal, stands at the prow, sniffing the salty air. The raven, perched on the mast, watches the horizon with quiet interest, occasionally offering a caw of commentary or, more likely, a reminder about breakfast. Joke number 1 stretches and yawns, muttering that even the sea seems to be holding its breath, waiting for the day to begin. You rise, muscles pleasantly tired from yesterday's packing and farewells, and join the crew around the fire brazier. Skapti is already stirring a pot of porridge sweetened with wild honey and the last of the fresh berries. Frydis consults her wax tablet, marking the day's agenda. Steady sailing, a check of provisions, and a toast to the journey so far. The crew moves with purpose, adjusting the sail, checking the new oars, and stowing the baskets of grapes, herbs, and Vinland wine. Mainstream historical fact tiptoes in. Norse sailors often kept detailed records of their voyages, blending practical notes with saga-worthy flourishes, early logbooks, minus the bureaucracy. Mid-morning, Frydis takes a sunstone reading, confirming your course. The wind is steady, the sea calm, and Vinsel glides forward with easy grace. The goat, ever the morale officer, trots along the deck, offering silent encouragement to each crew member. The raven, ever the opportunist, snatches a berry from a basket and retreats to a sunny spot to enjoy its prize. By midday, the crew gathers for a shared meal. Bread, cheese, and a taste of Vinland wine. Skald Bjorn tells the story of your adventures, embellishing just enough to make the goat the hero and the raven the wise, if slightly berry-stained, counselor. Laughter rings across the deck, blending with the creak of timbers and the rush of waves as afternoon light softens. You help check the provisions, counting baskets of grapes, herbs, and wine. The timber crew inspects the new oars and spare mast, their smooth wood gleaming in the sun. The cook stirs a pot of stew, the scent mingling with salt and wind. Evening brings a quiet hush, the firelight flickering on faces old and new. You lean back, faith compass warm in your pocket, pebbles rattling softly. The goat dozes at your feet, its wreath now a chaotic masterpiece of grapevine, feathers, and leaves. The raven perches on the rail, one eye on the horizon, one on the fire. Frydis sits beside you, her face lit by flickering light. Not bad for a day's work, she murmurs. You nod, gazing at the stars beginning to prick through the twilight. Tomorrow, you will be homeward bound, carrying new stories, new friends, and the taste of Vinland wine. But for now, you're content to sail, surrounded by laughter, tradition, and the sweet promise of tomorrow's journey. The sea hums a lullaby of wind and water. You close your eyes, listening to the steady breath of the goat, the rustle of the raven's feathers, the distant murmur of the shore. Somewhere ahead, home awaits, ready for the next chapter. But tonight, you are here, on Vinsel's deck, with stories yet to tell and dreams as endless as the stars. Morning at sea arrives with a hush, the sun rising over a calm ocean, painting the deck of Vinsel in soft gold. The goat, its wreath now a little more windswept but still regal, stands at the prow, sniffing the salty air. The raven, perched on the mast, watches the horizon with quiet interest, occasionally offering a caw of commentary or, more likely, a reminder about breakfast. Joke number 1 stretches and yawns, muttering that even the sea seems to be holding its breath, waiting for the day to begin. You rise, muscles pleasantly tired from yesterday's steady sailing, and join the crew around the fire brazier. Skapti is already stirring a pot of porridge sweetened with wild honey and the last of the fresh berries. Frydis consults her wax tablet, marking the day's agenda. Final checks, a toast to the journey, and preparations for homecoming. The crew moves with purpose, adjusting the sail, checking the new oars, and stowing the baskets of grapes, herbs, and Vinland wine. Mainstream historical fact tiptoes in. Norse sailors often kept detailed records of their voyages, blending practical notes with saga-worthy flourishes, early logbooks, minus the bureaucracy. Mid-morning, Frydis takes a sunstone reading, confirming your course. The wind is steady, the sea calm, and Vinsel glides forward with easy grace. The goat, ever the morale officer, trots along the deck, offering silent encouragement to each crew member. The raven, ever the opportunist, snatches a berry from a basket and retreats to a sunny spot to enjoy its prize. By midday, the crew gathers for a shared meal. Bread, cheese, and a taste of Vinland wine. Skald Bjorn tells the story of your adventures, embellishing just enough to make the goat the hero and the raven the wise, if slightly berry-stained, counselor. Laughter rings across the deck, blending with the creak of timbers and the rush of waves as afternoon light softens. You help check the provisions, counting baskets of grapes, herbs, and wine. The timber crew inspects the new oars and spare mast, their smooth wood gleaming in the sun. The cook stirs a pot of stew, the scent mingling with salt and wind. Evening brings a quiet hush, the firelight flickering on faces old and new. You lean back, faith compass warm in your pocket, pebbles rattling softly. The goat dozes at your feet, its wreath now a chaotic masterpiece of grapevine, feathers, and leaves. The raven perches on the rail, one eye on the horizon, one on the fire. Frydis sits beside you, her face lit by flickering light. Not bad for a day's work, she murmurs. You nod, gazing at the stars beginning to prick through the twilight. Tomorrow, you will be homeward bound, carrying new stories, new friends, and the taste of Vinland wine. But for now, you're content to sail, surrounded by laughter, tradition, and the sweet promise of tomorrow's journey. The sea hums a lullaby of wind and water. You close your eyes, listening to the steady breath of the goat, the rustle of the raven's feathers, the distant murmur of the shore. Somewhere ahead, home awaits, ready for the next chapter. But tonight you are here on Vinsel's deck, with stories yet to tell and dreams as endless as the stars. The journey is winding down now, the steady rhythm of the sea and the familiar creak of the hull settling into your bones. Around you, the crew rests, their faces relaxed in the gentle glow of the fire brazier. The goat dozes at your feet, its grapevine and feather wreath now a tattered but proud symbol of all the adventures you've shared. The raven perches nearby, feathers ruffled by the breeze, its sharp eyes half closed in contentment. You breathe in the salt air, the scent of wood smoke and wild grapes mingling with the tang of the ocean. The wind hums a soothing melody, and the waves lap against Vinsel's sides like a lullaby. The faith compass rests in your pocket, its pebbles a quiet reminder of the decisions that brought you here, and the friends you've made along the way. Memories drift through your mind like clouds. Thingveller's steaming hot springs, the obsidian church, the grape glade in Vinland, the laughter and stories shared around the fire. You think of the new friends you've made, the old traditions you've honored, and the taste of Vinland wine on your tongue. The journey has been long, but every mile has been worth it as the stars come out. You lean back and let the gentle sway of the ship cradle you. The goat's breath is steady, the raven's feathers rustle softly, and the sea whispers secrets that only travelers understand. You close your eyes, letting the warmth of the fire and the comfort of good company ease you into sleep. Tomorrow, you'll wake to familiar shores and new stories to tell. But tonight, you drift, wrapped in the peace of the open sea, the gentle rhythm of the waves carrying you home, and your dreams stretching out as endless as the stars.